Right, we should be live, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Good evening to members of the public, to councillors and to visiting speakers, officers and everyone else joining the meeting this evening. I would say Happy New Year because this is the first meeting we've had as a cabinet, as a leadership team of 2021. So welcome. This meeting is being held remotely in line with the provisions of the regulations introduced by the government to enable local government decision-making meetings to be held remotely. The meeting is being broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. The meeting will also be available afterwards to view on the Council's YouTube channel. Visiting councillors, members of the public and officers not taking an active part in the meeting are requested to turn off their cameras until they're invited to speak. Could I also ask that you mute your microphones? I can hear some background noise at the moment. Please make sure you're muted, and when you're ready to speak, please unmute. So those people not taking part at the moment, please mute your microphones and activate them when you're ready to speak. The microphone is where we'll get the feed from as well to hear later when people are watching back. When speaking, please speak clearly and slowly for people to hear. Can I just ask Cabinet members to indicate to use the raise hand function when they're ready, because they'll be contributing quite a bit into the meeting. And I will now introduce myself and then introduce the rest of the Cabinet. So just to be clear, I'm Councillor Mark Corey, leader of Colchester Borough Council, and I lead the Cabinet, of which we have members here this evening, and I will ask them in this order to introduce themselves. So first of all, the Deputy Leader, Councillor Julie Young, then in alphabetical order, Councillor Adam Fox, Councillor Martin Goss, Councillor Teresa Higgins, Councillor David King, and Councillor Mike Lilly. Then I'll move to the officers. So Julie, please.
Good evening, I'm Julie Young, I'm Deputy Leader of the Council, and my portfolio responsibilities are culture, performance and the local plan.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Adam Fox. I am the portfolio holder for housing.
Good evening, Councillor Martin Goss. I am the Cabinet member for Waste, Transport and Environment and also a ward councillor for Mile End. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, I'm Councillor Teresa Higgins. I'm from Newtown and Christchurch ward and I am the portfolio holder for commercial services.
Good evening all. David King, councillor for Mile End ward and cabinet member for business and resources. And chair, my hand function doesn't work, so I'm afraid it'll be this one. Thank you.
Excuse me. Good evening, Councillor Mike Lilly, portfolio holder for communities, public safety and wellbeing.
Thank you. I think that's everybody, and I'll just say that I have a portfolio for strategy and communications for the wider council business, and I represent Wivenhoe. I'll move on to the officers now, and I'll invite officers to introduce themselves in terms of the three main officers this evening. We have the Chief Executive, Adrian Pritchard, the Monitoring Officer, Andrew Weavers, and Richard Clifford, the Lead Democratic Services Officer, helping us with the whole meeting. So, Adrian, please.
Good evening, Cabinet members of the public. Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive, Colchester Borough Council.
Good evening, Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer, Colchester Borough Council.
Good evening, Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, and thank you to your team, Richard, who help us with the meeting functioning. So thank you for that. I'll move on. So the provisions in the Constitution do say that we need timing breaks, usually around 8 o'clock after we've had 2 hours worth of movement or lack of it. So we will then have a break and we will put an item on the screen just to show that that's happening, and we'll come back within about 10 minutes. Just to introduce the work of the Cabinet for the benefit of the members of the public, I just want to explain the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. So we make most of the decisions in terms of the organisation, the running of the Council services, recommendations that we make to full Council, where all councillors take part and make decisions on major policy, but also on the Council's budget as well. The Cabinet is made up of those 7 councillors who've now introduced themselves, who each have a responsibility for a particular range of services, as we call it, a portfolio. Just before I move to the urgent items, I just wanted to take a few moments of reflection this evening, because we've got a few issues of the day that I think we need to reflect on. First of all, it's Holocaust Memorial Day today, and I feel it's really important that we understand and remember the impact of that, the impact of how people, because of their difference and their otherness, were persecuted. And we need to always remember that we should embrace the difference amongst our society and communities. And in Colchester, I think it's right that we mark this day. Furthermore, I wanted to mark the sad milestone of having over 100,000 deaths due to COVID. I've definitely been touched in our community much greater recently with the sad news of people dying, friends and neighbours. And I just wanted to reflect upon that sad situation. We are doing well in Colchester, and I do want to take the third point to reflect upon the great work of our community, people who are partners with the council who work really hard in our community, as well as council staff, whether that be the bin collectors who every day go around collecting our waste in a really efficient manner and have bravely done that on the front line all the way through the pandemic. And the neighbourhood wardens, people are out there on the front line, people have been running the services on and off when we've had to shut them, staff members at home carrying out those vital services that back up the whole council and back up our communities and our businesses. Those business grants that have been given out in their millions, with Colchester being one of the furthest forward councils in getting that money straight to businesses to ensure they keep going. So thank you to all members of staff, to the partners we work with. And I was on a call with One Colchester this morning involving lots of the key partners, of course, the NHS, the County Council, police, those partners who have worked together to ensure the COVID impact on our borough has been as little as possible. I just wanted to flag two things from that. When speaking to the police representative, they said compliance was very good in Colchester, and I want to thank people for doing the right thing. I really see compliance as being very good in Colchester and actually backed up by the business community. So the bid representative who did surveys around the town showed that there was only one person out of about 256 not wearing a mask correctly. The experience of people around town was 98% positive in terms of feeling safe and secure. So thank you to our communities, to our partners, our businesses who are making that safer, secure town centre and across the borough, making us reassured. Thank you to the NHS members who are explaining on the call how the vaccine rollout is improving and improving each day in Colchester. They're on the front line, and I want to thank them last as well. So after those reflection points, I will move on to an urgent item, item 2. We do have an urgent item this evening, and I'd ask if Richard could share the paper, please. The urgent item has come to us because it is urgent and we need to get support to people on the test and trace support payments. We do give out test and trace support payments, but this is a top up that we are carrying out, and it takes some of the money that Essex County Council have given us in terms of well-being and looking after people due to COVID impacts. So the reason for its urgency is that it arises and the need for the scheme to be implemented as soon as possible to enable the payments to be made to a wider group of those who are required to self-isolate. We are looking at people who perhaps have lost their jobs as a result of COVID, people who actually need to be encouraged to self-isolate through an economic incentive. We can't just expect people to live on the breadline and not be able to to isolate without support. So that's what we're doing in this paper. The Chair of Scrutiny has certified that this decision is urgent and the normal call-in provisions will not apply, so the decision can be implemented immediately, and I thank the Chair of Scrutiny for that. Therefore, Cabinet, you have discussed and seen this paper and it's presented now. So I want to move to the recommendations, unless Cabinet you do want to ask any further questions. We have had the excellent team of officers explain to us how we are going to administer this to the people, as I explained, most in need in our community to ensure they self-isolate. And Jason Granger is the author of this report. He's the excellent officer who has explained to us the ways in which we can best support people. Not only will we support those who are unemployed or those who have even a small pension, but also we will top up the discretionary scheme for the test and trace support payments that is already in place. But this extends our provision even further. So the recommendations were there. I was just going to read them, sorry. But Andrew Weavers, if you think I don't have to read them out, then please say, or if you want to do that as you call for them.
Chair, I don't think you need to read them out.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Richard or Owen, for putting those up. It's quite clear we agree to roll out this scheme as soon as possible and get the money out to people so they can self-isolate. So we support them economically to do the right thing in terms of COVID guidance. Over to you, Andrew, to administer the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Cabinet, for your work on that. Thank you, Jason, and for the team who are going to roll that out and support the members of our community. Thank you. I move forward to the declarations of interest. Are there any pecuniary interests that need to be indicated tonight, bearing in mind the agenda? Are there any, Cabinet, that you need to declare? No. Okay, thank you. No need to declare interest. We'll move on to item 4, the minutes of the last meeting from November the 23rd, 2020. Can I take that these are sufficient? And if there's any incorrect information or any dissent, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll take them as correct. Okay, I'll take them as correct. Thank you. We move on now to general have your say, and I have a few speakers who want to speak on general have your say. Most of the have your say speakers tonight will be for the item on Queen Street, and we'll take them on that item so that we can listen to them before we take that decision and we fully incorporate all of those speakers, some who will be here live, some who are there just through a written submission. I do have 2 councillors under general have your say, but I know that Councillor Barber as well wanted to jump in because he's got a parish council meeting to go to. I'm very generous, Lewis, and I'll let you in, but I know you wanted to speak on the alumno item. So you're the only one to jump in on that, and then I will take the other speakers all together on that item and we'll have an in-depth conversation. So first of all, I'll take Councillor Dundas and then Councillor Lissamore and then Councillor Barber for have your say. Richard, if I've missed anyone, please do let me know. So Councillor Dundas first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I just endorse Councillor Corey's comments that he made at the start of this meeting, and also just briefly mention Alderman Terry Sutton, who was a long-time servant of this borough, who we sadly lost to coronavirus earlier in the week. The topic I wanted to talk about briefly was the tree planting project, the woodland project, something which I certainly support. Why would anybody not support it? I think it's a very good initiative. But I've had a few comments from residents in my ward and I've seen around the borough recently, together with various photos and that, of some of the saplings being planted not being treated that well or not looking like they're going to survive into becoming trees. So I just have a few brief questions. Firstly, within the project, do we actually have a target for the number of saplings which make it to trees? In other words, say a number alive after 5 years, or as a percentage of those planted. Secondly, if we don't, do you think it would be sensible to set such a target? Because ultimately the only benefit really comes when they become trees. The reality is a sapling doesn't do a great deal of photosynthesizing and doesn't have a particularly big visual impact on our environment, which is what we want. And thirdly, you know, I know that quite a few of the trees have been obtained at low, or in some cases no cost, and much of the planting has been done by volunteers. But do you think it would be sensible to examine the budget ratio between the obtaining them, distributing them, and planting them part, and the long-term care part? Because at the end of the day, planting 50 trees and 30 surviving to maturity has to be better than planting 100 and only 10 making it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Valid points, and we're trying to find the right balance there. We've got high ambitions, and we've also, with the project, changed it to make sure it includes biodiversity gain and not just monocultures. But I will go to my expert on this, who's got it under his portfolio and been running the project. That's Councillor David King. So David, if you want to answer Councillor Dundas, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. Councillor Dundas, I think you've been party to some of the exchanges I've had with your colleagues. So some of this they will know. And we were able to set up, and I think it's a learning lesson for us in difficult COVID times, we can at least meet online and walk through the issues. So I think perhaps that's where I would start and end with this. The project's changed quite a bit, as you will know, over the course of the year, and as the leaders touched on, and it's the better for that. The exchanges with residents have overwhelmingly been positive. There have been issues in your ward, few elsewhere, but it's just one of those things. And in my view, some of it's been for very good reason. I had a sense of shock myself when I visited where we'd planted, 100 of us, as a fantastic community event, to see the loss rate after an extraordinary, but this is the point we need to stress, an extraordinary drought in the beginning of last year. We have to have a context for all the conversations around loss rate, target, and alternative. I can only assure you, as I do other members, that we've been up and down through this, taking the best learning, and we are sharing it. And I know I personally invest effort in responding to residents, as does the leader of the council. So I think we are right to think that we have widespread support for this, but we don't take it for granted. The adaptation of the project to include rewilding, biodiversity, and an awareness of location for tree planting. You know, I think that's perhaps in a way a summary of the learning that's been taken, which we'll see in next year's planting scheme. But to your three specific points, so health and vitality, absolutely they matter, but as I've described, we do not control, even Colchester Council, our local weather, which we did. And so we go from feast to famine, flood to drought, don't we? And that's a challenge for any planting by any organisation of any kind. In terms of targets, well, I've taken advice from this. I have to say I understood that the aim might be as high as 80% survival, but I'm told that the professionals would suggest, and we have to keep this in perspective, that these are cheap, these whips. I'll come back to your point about cost in a moment, that it might more realistically be 50%, allowing for the vagaries of weather that I've just described. So we do have a sense of what should happen in some places, but not in all. We fell short of that in the last year. I think it's more likely to be in 20%, but as I say, it does depend on the location. And that's caused us to look at what we could do about that. There are some great alternative schemes about for urban tree planting, as one illustration, which absolutely take account of the fact that if you're putting in certainly a mature tree, it's a big investment. But here's interesting, back to your point about money, the bigger cost is in watering it. And I've seen experience of that here also in North Colchester, where larger trees are regularly lost. So it's an economic balance. The trees are native from good stock, from a good and approved source of Woodland Trust. The investment of time and effort in putting them in is considerable, but it's a voluntary and community effort. We have, as I've just described, a sensible expectation, learning as we go about what will survive, but we're learning also about planting and where we plant. And I guess, again, I know that you've seen that because I copied you in on that. So that's the target. The costs are, as I say, an equation we don't have full control over, but it is more cost effective and better for tree planting, the specialists tell me, to plant whips because they root better. the chances of survival over time are better, but it is true that there is an expectation from the beginning that you'll have, vary by year though it will, a loss rate. I think there's probably a response to you. I'm happy to come back again. I will be writing out shortly with a sense of what we hope to do in the new year, which we'll be using, I think that was the last point you made, my apologies, using professionals rather than volunteers. But there is something really important about community engagement. It's not often you can get 100 people to turn up with their kids and lend you, Paul, and Lewis, amongst others, a hand in digging a hole. We have to choose better, perhaps, where we do that digging. We have to continue to encourage the local community to look after those trees, but we have to set the limitations of the project and the fact that some waste, some change, and sometimes some challenge is inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that covered all of the points, and I'd just add, because I've been close to this as well, that you're working with the Woodland Trust more now, and also the Colchester Natural History Group as well, taking advice where we can get it and when we can get it, because as you say, there's been some real low instances in some cases of planting where survival rate has been low, but other places it has been better. It just does depend on the sites. Paul, with our busy evening, can I ask, is that everything and enough of an answer?
It is. Thank you for the answer. I just would comment, I think that the project does have general good high levels of public support. I think it's just, learn from experience. We all have to do that. And it's important that we retain that public support, and hopefully we will. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll go to Councillor Sue Lissamore, please. Hopefully I have seen Sue. So over to you.
Thank you. I understand my video has been turned off by the host. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'll wait.
Yeah.
If we can
okay, not a problem.
For accessibility purposes. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. Many will be speaking tonight on the alumni development, so I will leave it to those who have worked so hard to enlighten the council on its issues to speak in detail tonight. However, I would just like to thank Dorian Kelly for all the work that he has done on this issue. He didn't have to. He's not an elected representative of the council. He did it because he cares and feels passionately that this development is wrong to push through. I would like to thank him on behalf of other councillors for the time he has taken on this and his efforts to include us as elected representatives. I would like to direct my comments tonight, however, towards Councillor Goss as Cabinet Member for Waste. We have a few exchanges and I see his comments on some Facebook sites, and I've noticed a change in some of his responses with regards to supplies of recycling materials. There have been a real issue lately with residents receiving their requests, particularly for clear waste bags, some having to wait over 6 weeks to get a supply. Some are getting them quicker, but only a few weeks ago, I was informed that there were over 1,400 outstanding requests for recycling material that this council had been asked to be delivered. I have said for many years that if we expect residents to recycle properly and to our best abilities, we must have the tools to be able to do that recycling. That includes food waste bins, tins and glass bins, garden waste bags, and clear recycling sacks. In the past, I, as Shadow Cabinet Member for Waste and the representation for waste for the Conservative group, have had a supply of clear recycling bags. We have been able to give those to residents that are desperate when they have run out. So this is not a replacement for the main supply from the council, but a very useful supplement when residents are desperate and have run out of options. I have now run out and I have been refused to be allowed to have any more. I've asked Councillor Goss and service managers, but again, I have been refused to have any more. Please look at this sensibly. We as councillors are at the heart of our communities. We can help out, especially if a service is suffering due to COVID and low staff levels. Use us. Let each political group have a supply of clear recycling bags and we can hand them out sensibly, and keep recycling going. The other point is that I've noticed Councillor Goss's tone change in the last few months when he has been talking to residents, particularly on Facebook, about clear recycling bags. When before he has said, here's the process, please apply, the council will get the bags to you, he is now saying, buy them. Sainsbury's sell them. Tesco sells clear bags. Can I please ask Councillor Goss if he intends to charge in the future for clear recycling bags? Let us not forget why we have them, to make it as easy as possible for residents to recycle and to ensure as little as possible is put into our black refuse bags or wheelie bins. If Councillor Goss starts charging, we all know, I'm just finishing, we all know that councils are facing a big financial problem at the moment, but more waste will go in black bags, which would cost us as a council and us as taxpayers even more money. So Councillor Goss, can you rule out charging for clear recycling bags? Thank you.
Councillor Lissamore. Martin.
I'll keep it short. As of last Friday, there were 1,000 bags due for delivery. None of them were over the 3-week period, and I get weekly statistics from the team. So there are no residents waiting for more than 3 weeks. So that was the statistics as of last Friday. In terms of charging, we are not planning on charging for plastic sacks, and I really do hate any kind of conspiracy theories or misinformation. And the reason that I might have told some residents where to buy bags from is because they've asked me. And obviously all retailers sell them, including Amazon, Wilkinson's and all supermarkets. So if I'm asked that question, that is the answer I will give. And I have said to people, if you're really desperate because you're running out, I can either give you a couple of mine or you can buy them if you're really desperate. But generally, they will turn up no later than 3 weeks. And the feedback we've had is some people get them, within an hour. I've seen it as quick as that. That's quicker than a takeaway. It's quicker than a Chinese takeaway getting to my house. So, generally the teams are working really well. We've got some deployed staff that are working in that area, doing a fantastic job. And I think the team are doing a brilliant job. We will not be giving councillors plastic sacks. We now have absolutely accurate data on consumption of all recycling that is ordered. Obviously, that's important for budgeting. Before, you wouldn't have had that MI because obviously it's in either councillors' driveways or in centres where this stuff is picked up. But individually, we can now map exactly who is having what, and that is really, really important for planning for the following year, etc., and for growth within the service. So that is why this system works. That is why the MI is really important, and that is what we will continue to do. There were some teething problems earlier in the process. That's been ironed out. And I also caused a blip because I put it all over Facebook. So I think I created over 1,400 orders on one day to ensure people got them in time for Christmas. But we dealt with it. We delivered the majority of those in time. So it proves we can do it. It's a good service to the residents. It's not costing them anything. It turns up at their door. And it's a much more effective service at this moment in time, particularly during COVID. We absolutely cannot have bags at councillors' houses creating extra trips for people. That is not an essential journey under the current government legislation or under guidance. So we certainly won't be encouraging it. But as ever, we will do all we can for residents. We thank them for continuing to recycle, and our recycling rates are going up because more stuff is being recycled, and we will continue.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. As I said to Councillor Dundas before, Councillor Lissamore, I will move on quickly. Is there anything very swiftly to add? I think you got a clear answer. Thank you for that. Okay, and Councillor Barber, generously taking at this item, but I know you're talking about alumni.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Yes, just some questions help me understand the issue a bit better, particularly after the debate we had last summer on the issue of appropriation, in which you basically ruled it out and then said we were spreading misinformation on the topic. So I was just asking a few questions around this issue, and thank you for the opportunity. First of all, just understanding which cabinet member signed and or authorised the contract with Alumno, and also the justification really of doing so to get a gross return per annum, although it's a lump sum, works out per annum of under £4,000, and that's before deducting costs that may be associated with appropriation from that amount. In a letter also that I've just had sight of that you've sent to the Secretary of State and copied in the Member of Parliament, you state that you're using normal tools available to a local authority to regenerate an area under the sort of planning law, but I'd probably argue that it's not normal practice to use appropriation powers to overreach a third party right of another local authority. I think that's quite exceptional by overreaching the covenant of Essex County Council. I'm also interested as a clause of the contract, as we've not had sight of the contract as elected members, and what the clause requires you to do over appropriation, and whether there is a clause that requires you to appropriate. In which case, if there is, how come last summer you said it was not your intention to appropriate the land, and you ruled that out when I asked about it at Cabinet when I flagged it as an issue. If the answer, I guess, to the question was at the time you weren't aware that there was a provision in the contract that may require you to use appropriation of the land, how do you justify having signed a contract as an authority and not knowing what's in it? I think that would be concerning if that was the case. Either way, I don't think it reflects particularly well on the debates we had last summer. You either didn't know about it or you did and said you weren't doing it, which is a bit unfortunate, I think. How much? I guess also it's of public interest to know if there is funds that you have to commit to appropriation, what level of funds they are, and whether you can confirm that in the public domain, and if not, why not? Whether you've looked into the potential costs or possibility of negotiating out the contract that you willingly and freely signed into as an authority, as a cabinet, and whether you've pursued this as a possible option. And I guess if there is no such clause on appropriation, how you can justify pursuing this avenue, which includes seeking to overreach the covenant of another public authority that has said it does not wish for the covenant to be lifted. So I struggle. The crux of the issue for me is that the cabinet entered into a contract it never had to, and it signed up to potentially quite onerous clauses, and I feel it's got itself into a hard place now, between a rock and a hard place. And it's because of that contract, for which elected members have not had sight of, that I suspect you've got yourself in some difficulties. And I think that elected members should have sight of that contract to understand the issues involved, so we can debate this freely and fairly. And I just want to put on record my strong opposition to the avenues you're going down here. It's an unpopular scheme. It's not fit for purpose in that area, and it's a low return to the council. I do not understand why you're doing it. It's the amount of money you're getting for a prime piece of real estate in the centre of town, that could be a real key for regeneration. The planning department said it had limited economic benefits for the town in the planning meeting on the officers. So I struggle to see what the arguments are to pursue this and why you entered into the contract in the first place. So some questions there I think would be beneficial for you to answer in the debate later on. I know I won't get an answer now, but I will keenly listen in to the discussion whilst giving my update to the Parish Council in West Bergholt, for which they truly enjoyed your attention to once Councillor Corey when you came along. So thank you very much for doing that, and thank you very much in advance for answering my questions later this evening. Farewell.
Thank you, Lewis. You put many questions there, which I saw Councillor King is most appropriate to answer them, noting most of them down. I'll just answer one point that in the debates we've had before, they were directed at, I think, court action with the County Council, which I would want to avoid. And I have had many discussions and lots of dialogue with the County Council, which is ongoing, and that will come out in the debate later, of course. So, Councillor King, I assume you took most of those, and we will get back to them. Thank you, Councillor Barber. We'll get to that debate later, which I'm sure will be absolutely full and detailed, and we've got many other people who want to take part in that. So thank you. That's the end of the general have your say items. I'll move on to item 6, which is decisions referred from the scrutiny panel, which I believe there are none. Can you confirm for me, Richard, please?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. We move on then to the first item, which is item 7, which is the budget for 2021-22 and the medium-term financial forecast. This is a highly important piece of work in order to set our budget straight in these difficult times. And I hand over to Councillor King to do that and to run us through the excellent parts of this budget. And over to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And I will pick up on what I'll weave into whatever else we hear tonight. I will pick up on the points made by Councillor Lewis Barber the best I can, and as ever, we'll be happy to talk to him offline, although that's probably less attractive than 8 questions in one. He's doing very well at the multiple. Some councillors do excellently on that. Let's go to the paper. This addresses, as it says, budget 2021-22, that's the next financial year, and the longer term, the medium term financial forecast. So it's looking forward for 4 years. This paper from our Section 151 officer and the related suite of papers is including Treasury Management and the Reset Capital Programme, Leader, which we'll take in a moment, were very constructively and robustly reviewed by the scrutiny panel last night. With senior officers alongside, we as Cabinet have rightly been through this several times, as also through using our mechanism of the budget group. So I commend what we've got. I note it reflects not only that earlier work, but earlier scrutiny panel work, given the turbulence of this last financial year, 3 budget workshops with members invited from across the chamber and well attended, and a related, if largely unsuccessful, task and finish group. And my respects to Councillor Bourne for even attempting to try and get an agreement on garden waste charging. So we can be as Cabinet clear, as can those watching and listening, that we have the best understanding of all the issues and impacts on income, revenue and expenditure in the near and medium term, and that we've captured this within this paper, which has scrutiny panel cross-party support. I think it'd be helpful, however, to touch on issues that were raised by members last night and then turn to the recommendations. Now, I welcomed interest in further cross-party budget workshops. This may not interest the public, I accept that, but they do help ensure that there is an understanding that's wider than Cabinet and officers of the challenges, pressures and opportunities that we have and how we're going to go about them. So those workshops will be arranged going forward. Members wanted a variety of extra pieces of information, the most substantial of which we'll make sure that we circulate to all before we go to full council. Amongst them were assurances on election management costs. Well, the good news is, having checked today, that we compare very favourably with our counterparts, 4th best value for money out of 15. Members were very supportive of both the quality of the work and the underlying assumptions. I can confirm, as we were requested last night, to run further check on one key income stream, which is car parking for this council. We are content, and we can share this, that it is robust and takes account of what we know and what we might reasonably expect. Members last night accepted the calls needed on reserves to help us balance the books, and accepted our view that the reserves and saving measure actions were appropriate to the challenge that we've got. We still forecast reserves at the end of 31st of March 22 at over 15 million, and that's thanks to past prudence, despite meeting current and forecast pressures and planned calls for satisfying pension deficits addressed elsewhere. We'll arrange, as I say, for a further paper on this. But I wanted to, and to also address micro but important issues touched on earlier, such as the volatility in some very important work streams, such as cost and income in waste management. So in short, we have a grip on the impacts of the pandemic economically, if anybody can be said to do that, and the lockdown. We've reflected that in the budget papers. We will, as we are obliged to do, close the budget gap. We now expect that we will need to set aside and draw on 1.3 million, not the 1 million in the paper. This reflects the latest analysis of spend and income, but we can do that as we described without an issue. Looking forward, the budget paper sets out the reality. We must do what we can, not just to reduce costs, to transform the organisation one more time, but also to raise income where that's reasonable to do so. There was no consensus over garden waste charges, and we understand why. So we have raised, where we can, fees and charges, and they will be dependent in value upon demand by something like inflation, 3%. And we are suggesting to full council, recommending to full council as to this cabinet tonight, that we raise modestly council tax. Typically that will be a £5 per household. The challenge lies in the medium term, much more than it does right now. We have managed this year. We've set out in detail how we can manage the coming year, but we are leaving the organisation with a huge problem of taking cost from within the organisation with least impact upon services. In the coming year, 21-22, I would believe that's achievable. Going beyond that, unless there is a real change in underlying assumptions or in government support, the team will have to work that much harder to take cost out of the organisation. And we promised that we will share information on that when we have it, as I've said, in the same consultative fashion as before. That's an opportunity and an obligation on me to also say, as we all must, a huge thank you to our fantastic finance and other staffs and our service leaders, those who tried to keep things running, keep money coming through, as well as ensure that we treat people with compassion where they have a problem in meeting those bills with us. Our teams will look at transformation and opportunity. There are some really interesting ones that lie ahead. They range from how we might organise ourselves, working with partners, and Leader, you've been personally deeply involved with that, with senior officers like Pam Donnelly, and looking at our capital assets like Rowan House, where there's a real prospect that will be remodelled, reused, and will be a better place for it with service and perhaps police partners and others. We could find new ways of working, certainly a much closer possibility of relationship and then a better service for the public we serve. I think probably that would do for me. I'd just like to finish about talking about reserves. It's important when people worry about paying bills, and many people will, that we are clear that we are well placed, and I've touched on that. We have what we need for not just a rainy day, but a long monsoon. I have real confidence, as will Cabinet, that we have the right people leading our council teams for us and for the wider full council. And that's why I recommend, as I do, the paper that's attached. I have one last remark, which will be in recommending that we accept the recommendations set out, as assessed yesterday by scrutiny panel, that as we will address, we pick up on their recommendations about making sure we have an equality test, and when we look at our budget measures, and that we share that and welcome views from other members and more widely, and that we acknowledge that the government's role is absolutely critical in the way in which local authorities survive the long echo of the pandemic and the recession that's been caused by the lockdown. The full impacts of that will not be known for many months. It is likely that the hangover will be several years long, given the depth of the crisis and the huge impacts on business, retail, hospitality of accelerated change. They all too impact upon us as a council in terms of our income. We must continue to press government for help and support. We must press them, and we have, to reconsider measures that take income away from us, like their reduction in new homes bonus legacy payments. They're no longer available. This is millions out of our future budget, and it's a real challenge. But we can be confident in the people we have and how we are placed, and I commend the report accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's been a tremendous challenge this year, and I do have confidence in you and your work with the finance team. Thank you to Paul, who leads that up, for being flexible and working with us, having to push at the reserves and looking at different ways in which we face this challenge that we have been given this year and beyond, and last year in particular. So I want to just thank you and your team, but also staff across the whole council who have put together this budget, enabled savings, etc. Some redundancies actually, sadly, that have to occur as well. And you mentioned the budget workshops. I think the public would be really pleased to hear that you've done that with our full support as Cabinet, to be there to listen to cross-party briefings and involvement, democratic involvement from every councillor on the council if they wanted to come along and be involved. I think that is really transparent, and that has been refreshing for many members, and they have welcomed that, and thanks you for that through scrutiny and in other places. So I thank you again, David. The COVID impact has been really tough, and we've got our strategic vision to keep us guiding Colchester in the right direction. And we've had to look at where to, as you've explained, increase income to bring money in, to reduce costs, to take money out of the organisation. As you've said, unfortunately, the government have given us some support, but did not give us everything that was promised to get us through the crisis for us to spend to protect our communities. So we know with our strategic vision that we are investing for a greener borough and a greener future. You can name some of those investments, and you may do in the capital programme on the next item. We've got focusing on our culture and heritage as much as possible with our limited resources, but to shine a light on our heritage as much as possible. Our safe, healthier communities, promoting lots of investment in the borough to new and exciting activities for our public once things open up more after COVID, hopefully. And also to build homes, of course, for people that need them. And that's part of the inequalities work. And that's our fifth strategic aim, which is to ensure our economy is fair for all, and everyone has an opportunity to take part, to get work, to be supported, to get housing, to be supported with that. And the equalities piece picked up by scrutiny is absolutely even more important now as we come through the pandemic, because that has highlighted the inequalities that remain in this country today and have done and need to be shown for what they are. And we as a borough need to say to county, need to say to government that we need to improve upon the inequalities because they harm us all as a society, but the most vulnerable in particular. So thank you, David. I've summarised really there. I don't know if any other Cabinet members want to come in, but you've given us a full and frank explanation of the macro and the microeconomics. I can't see any other hands up, so I will stop talking and thank you all for your input and ask that we go straight to the vote. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just be clear that when we go to the vote, you are including the recommendation to Cabinet from scrutiny panel?
Yes, David has accepted that, I believe.
I have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, David. I will go straight back to you, David, for the resetting of the capital programme and the capital strategy. But before I do bring you in, I've got I have your say speaker, Councillor Oxford. So Gerard, I hope you're here and listening and able to hear us, and we're able to hear you. Please come forward and speak on this item.
Good evening, Leader. Yes, I just wanted to speak briefly on this subject because, we've been working on a programme in this ward of ours in High Woods for over 6 years. And with your assistance, I have to say, which is great, we're grateful for, you've recognised what we were saying in that in the past, Section 106 monies that should have delivered things for our ward that would benefit my community haven't materialised. So you've now agreed to capital fund the project of a new community centre for Highwoods that will be run by the diocese, and then recover Section 106 monies going forward. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you for that, because I know it was a big commitment by yourselves, but equally my community will be enormously grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. I think Councillor King will pick that up as he moves forward to the capital programme. I won't waste any time and go straight to you, David, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Oxford. I will keep it as we've agreed, brief, so there's time for all else we must get through. As we all know, and again reviewed last night and endorsed, supported by scrutiny. And
I don't know if it's me, but I'm losing connection with you, David. We may have to have David log out and log back in again. David, please try to log out and log back in, or switch off your camera, but I'm worried about the accessibility of that. David, just to be clear, we cannot hear you, so please try and log out and log back in again. Whilst we wait for that, I will give a general overview of the capital programme, which is a high level account of the spending that we are carrying out across the borough. And actually, as a result of the COVID crisis that we've had, we see that it's absolutely appropriate to invest as much locally as possible to help the local economy. And I will try and go back to David so he can express all of that good work in a bit more detail. Should we try again, Councillor King?
thank you, Leader. Let's see what happens now. Always like to do go unstable, as it says, live. What I was just saying, and I'm sure you picked this up, Leader, was what this embraces. And I was about to say that the easy words are, and then I lost you, that it's ambitious, and it is relative to the size and scale of the borough. We have a deserved reputation for being ambitious, to attract investment and to make investment, and to be clear about the longer term. Some of what we do now reflects decisions made by previous administrations many years ago about land purchase and a sense of vision, even if the detail was not then formed or understood. We build on others, and we hope to do the same for those who follow us. So this is an ambitious capital programme. It will generate jobs, and I will continue to say this unashamedly. This is really going to matter for everybody, including those we know and those we don't, across our borough and beyond. It will generate, therefore, jobs and income. That's another question often asked. Yes, it will, from the sports park and the heat network at Northern Gateway to housing, which does cover its own costs, as well as provide a huge, much needed social benefit, and to investments in Leisure World and Rowan House, which investments in turn in the needs of our residents, those who work for us, and our collective future. The paper provides, in a way that's been welcomed, more summary detail on what those projects include, and in terms of cost and the benefit that they will provide. It does, as Councillor Oxford say, include us addressing community needs, including those long waiting to be addressed in Highwoods in North Colchester. And I'm equally pleased that between us, we've been able to find a way to fill that long-standing gap, as we have done, as we will seek to do elsewhere. Lastly, the paper does include the town deal. Now, this is for visibility purposes, although it's been very widely shared. Not everybody will see it, certainly not in this summary and connected way alongside other existing or planned new projects which require capital investment. We await, as many will know, the approval we require from government officials, but we are confident that we put forward a set of sound and connected propositions with the benefits that are described in the paper. So what we have in front of us, tested by the scrutiny panel yesterday, is a very wide-ranging but connected set of opportunities for investment for the benefits described. It is important, I say this, that it is prudent and affordable, takes account of financing and capital repayments, as well as capital receipts and income that we would hope to generate by this investment. And as a whole, it helps economic recovery, will create or retain employment, and it's clear to any that this will improve our borough as a destination for further investment, as a place to work, live or visit. And I commend recommendations and the detail. The recommendations are in 2.1 to 2.3 to Cabinet colleagues. It will then go forward to full council if you so agree.
Thank you, David, and thank you for persevering. I absolutely agree with you. It's an ambitious capital programme, much more so than other boroughs, but that is to the benefit of the residents, not only for new exciting projects to spring up, but also for investment in our local economy to create jobs and to create more local economic stimulus, which will help us all hopefully help with the wider pot of money that we can invest into other services as well. I don't see any other indications, but I'll give Cabinet members a chance. I know we have talked through this report, and again, thank you, David, for your transparency with the capital programme as well, explaining that to all members of the council. So I believe we can take this forward to a vote. Andrew, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you again, David, and to all of the team behind you and those officers who have come this evening to support. So thank you. Therefore, we now move on to item 8.2, which is the matters relating to the third-party rights at Queen Street and the Alumno development, which many of the Have Your Say speakers have come for this evening. So I will take a quick pause just to check that we still have those people connected. We have some speakers who will speak live on camera, and please do speak clearly and have your camera on. And we have some where the Democratic Services Officer will read out the submission. We do that in order to ensure that we're inclusive, and if anyone's connection does fall out, we have got their words ready to commit. So I will go with members of the public first, and then we'll go to the councillors. So first of all, Dorian, please. Have I got you here? Yep, there you are. Good evening, Dorian.
Good evening.
3 minutes. I would say not to start the time yet. I'm still talking, so I'll let you have the full time. I'll just explain that usually we have 15 minutes for a Have Your Say section on an item like this. I will be allowing more time because we've got so many speakers, but I will take everyone on block and try and ensure we can answer all your questions back. I know you personally have emailed us, and Councillor King had a lot of correspondence with you, but I'm sure there's more you have to say this evening. That's fine. And we'll take as much as we can from each speaker and then respond accordingly.
Yes.
Thank you. Over to you. Your time will start shortly.
Right. Well, you have before you, I hope, my official objection and also the my annotations to the officer's report. It's actually a bit more like a sales document than actually a disinterested balancing of facts. Worse, it's a complete dismissal, or at best, willful misinterpretation of the various clear and unambiguous rules about appropriation that are contained within my objection. This document is notable for what it doesn't say. For example, It doesn't say that appropriation is not possible until complete planning permission is in place. That's case law. And it doesn't remind you that until the various Grampian conditions are met, it is not complete planning permission. It could still fail. Nowhere does it tell you you must have previously resolved and minuted that this piece of land is no longer required for the purposes for which it was used immediately to the appropriation, which was access and resort, which we insist that it is still in use for. Nowhere does it spell out and quantify the considerable harms, costs, and dangers caused that you are required to balance against any benefits. So lack of that information, no decision is possible. It doesn't say either that purely financial considerations are not allowed to be taken into account under the rules when considering appropriation. This report is very heavy on financial benefits, but you've got to ignore them. It does say, though, that compensation will be payable. In fact, it says it 20 times. But very few people that I've spoken to, and a lot, are interested in that. They just want to live their quiet life and come and go to their homes and businesses. Please don't give the officers the unlimited powers over this they've asked for. They're not noted in prioritising the interests of the people, even the disabled, over that of developers. Their agents are already behaving like a bull in a china shop, with no conception of the sheer scale of the devaluations, inconvenience and business disruption involved. In fact, they think that the value will rise because of proximity to a block full of penniless itinerants. But here's the thing. Appropriation is actually unnecessary. The covenant will be sorted out either in the courts or under private agreement. The rights of way are the proper province of the planning committee and no one else under the Local Government Act. It has to be a proper application and consultation taking its due time. Until then, no development can take place. And as for moving the goalpost by extending the time before the lease agreement expires, alumni have got plenty of time to solve their own intrinsic and intractable design problems that they knew about from the word go and tried to pretend didn't exist, or worse still, put those problems onto you to solve for them. It's up to them to indicate a clear path for development themselves. So no, if the application fails, it fails. It's not your problem. And don't worry about being sued by alumni. By all means, take advice from somebody not so close to you as your solicitor, but you will find that you've already bent over backwards to try and take the one reasonable course of action that it demands. To sum up, the conditions for appropriation are not met. If you resolve to appropriate, knowing these legal restraints, you do run the serious...
That's time, Chairman.
Okay, the serious risk of judicial review and the delays that might occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorian, and thank you for finishing very quickly. Very thoughtful contributions. Thank you. I do appreciate those and the conversations you've had with Councillor King as well. We will try and address some of that in the response. I'll only say, David, if there's anything really precise you wanted to bring up, do come in, but otherwise we'll take them en bloc so that we can fit it all in. Okay. Thank you, Dorian. I'll move on. I believe it's Alan Short next. Alan, again, thank you for your correspondence. But this evening, you have 3 minutes and we'll bring you forward. Once I see you, there you are. I will hand over to you and let you have your say. And let's make sure we will collect everything you have to say and try and respond back as we have done over email. And we always try and keep to the facts as best as we can as well. So over to you.
Right, I've been looking at the legislation relating to cabinets and planning. The 2000 Act, as amended, specifically excludes cabinet government from certain activity. One of the things that it excludes is related to the regulation of highways, including footpaths and bridleways. The council's own procedure rules and constitution is quite clear. The council established committees to undertake non-executive functions under powers delegated by the full council. Planning is not an executive function and cannot be discharged by the cabinet. The planning committee deals with planning applications, planning enforcement, public rights of way and certain highway matters. So the fact that you've been dealing with this is ultra vires. The matter should not have been included on the agenda. The matter should be discussed by the planning committee. It should be referred by the planning committee, who should be dealing with all public rights of way issues and related matters for access to the site. It's quite clear to me that that has not been done, that the council should withdraw all of the correspondence that it issued to the rights of way holders, all of the publications that it's made of its actions in this matter. The planning committee is specially protected. It is not. It could not be subject to unreasonable influence. You cannot have a whipping system, and yet the planning committee has not discussed this. It should discuss it, and yet you've severely prejudiced it by the papers that you've put out. I don't know why you think that the planning committee, can be bypassed on this, thinking that this is a matter for the cabinet. It is not a matter for the cabinet. It is a matter for the planning committee.
Thank you, Alan. Again, we'll pick up some of those points and make sure we entertain those. Thank you again. I will move on to, we have a written submission next from Sir Bob Russell. So Richard, can I come to you, please, to read that out? And then following that, a written submission from Jennifer Brown, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the written submission from Sir Bob Russell. Excuse me. It is not edifying to see Colchester Borough Council and Essex County Council engaged in a legal dispute. It is damaging to the image of local government. What I am witnessing is without precedent in my 50 years of variously being an observer and participant of local government in Colchester. Disagreements between councils are one thing, inevitable. They happen occasionally, for example, whether or not streetlights should be left on overnight, but this is different. The Essex County Council feels obliged to seek council's opinion on how the Borough Council has behaved, reference the covenant for the site on the former bus station, suggests the Borough did not show due diligence before proceeding with the development intentions of Alumno. Essex County Council feels this is the case. And the agenda item is about appropriation, taking away the legal rights for residents and businesses, not for public benefit, but for the benefit of a property developer. I do not believe the relevant Act of Parliament was ever intended to be used in such a way, certainly not by one local council against another local council. Let me ask the Cabinet this. Were you aware that when the Borough Council sold the former Tourist Information Centre on the corner of High Street and Queen Street, it did so in full knowledge and also known to the purchaser that with the deeds came the legal right of way through the development site to the rear of the former Tourist Information Centre to provide servicing, which will be denied the new owner of the building if the council proceeds with appropriation. Further, when the council marketed the Tourist Information Centre, was it known that the council would subsequently seek to remove the right of way? If so, was that information withheld from potential purchasers? Next, the Human Rights Act, which from the Cabinet report, to my mind, suggests the recommendation for appropriation is not being complied with. A fair balance has not been struck between the public interest and the private rights protected by Article 1, for the simple reason the development cannot be regarded as being in the public interest. Added to which, there is an even more expressive rejection of the case of appropriation, namely that it must be proportionate in the public interest. A development of student accommodation by a private developer does not tick the box public interest. Evidence shows that the Court of Public Opinion does not support this development. Cabinet has refused to allow all 51 borough councils decide whether the development has their support. The only time councillors other than Cabinet members have had a chance to debate the matter was at the Planning Committee, and those councillors unanimously refused the application by 10 votes to nil. What has happened to local democracy? And why was a contract signed by the council with Alumno the day before the Planning Committee meeting? My advice to Cabinet is to reject the recommendation for appropriation and don't dig the hole any deeper. And that's the end of Sir Bob Russell's submission, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. And I'll ask you to move on to the next one, which is from Jennifer Brown.
Thank you. This is from Jennifer Brown. Hello, this is your council speaking. With no proper consultation, we'll take away your vehicle access to the rear of your home. We'll take away your access to your own land that you paid for when buying your home. We'll take away your ability to monitor the safety of your vehicles right outside your home with CCTV. We'll take away your freedom to have visitors use your private car park. We'll take away your freedom to have tradespeople access the rear of your property. We'll take away your freedom to load your vehicle for a visit to the tip. We'll take away your freedom to unload your shopping right by your back gate. We'll take away your freedom to have building works done to the rear of your property. We'll take away your ability to change your to charge your electric or non-electric vehicle when the battery is flat. We'll take away your freedom to wash your vehicle. Instead, you should park in a local council-owned car park. You won't be guaranteed a space, and it's not the closest car park to you. In fact, it's a 7-minute walk away. We hope you don't become disabled in any way. If you find a spot and it's night time when you have to walk along Queen Street, suck it up. If you have lots of shopping to unload, just make multiple trips back to your home and suck it up. If you need to load your car for a trip to the tip or with suitcases for a trip away, we hope you can carry all that stuff and have time and energy to make multiple trips to the car park. But don't worry, this is only temporary. It's only for a minimum of 2 years. Now, you didn't miss here, not 2 days or 2 weeks, a minimum of 2 years. Yes, we know building projects rarely finish on time. Yes, your home probably won't be saleable during this time. Is your sacrifice and prolonged massive inconvenience for the greater good? Will your fellow Colcestrians all benefit as they should on the terms of the covenant? No, this is for the benefit of private commerce, and even its customers will be non-local people. So when it's all over, you'll have your right of way back. Well, no, it won't be the same. This time there'll be bollards along the way. You'll have to operate them. We don't care if you have visitors or tradespeople or deliveries or district nurses attending. You'll have to work out when they are arriving and go outdoors and operate the bollards. Just suck it up. If the bollards fail, suck it up. You have to wait around at whatever time it is until someone fixes them. Yes, we know you're our electorate. You pay council taxes and we're supposed to be working on your behalf, but we really care about our good friend at Lumno. What's that you say? Have we no shame? That's the end of that submission, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you reading those 2 submissions out, and we'll have to come back to you for a few more shortly. I know it's quite a burden, but thank you for that. You've read it, I think, as the members of the public wanted you to, so thank you. We will take that on board, and again, David in particular, and the rest of us will reply as best as we can. Thank you, Richard. The next person I have is Matthew Mastrani. Please, Matthew.
Chairman, Matthew hasn't joined the meeting. I do have his submission if you want me to read it out. It's comparatively short.
Okay, well, thank you again. And that's why we ask people to submit, just in case they can't come along, but we will include him, of course. So back to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to reiterate mine and several others' objections to the development and appropriation of the land that will take away our right of way. This matter hasn't gone away or died down, and just because the many objections have been heard before, they should not be forgotten at this meeting. The right of way cannot be taken away as there is no solution to the many problems raised. A sympathetic development that has been thought through would be welcome, but not this and in the way it has been dealt with. And that's the end of his submission, Chairman.
Thank you. What I might do is, just so I give you a short break to have a glass of water, is I'll move to John Burton now, and I'll come back to you for the other speaker that has submitted, if that's okay, Richard. Thank you. John Burton.
Chairman.
John Burton, then, please. Can I ask you to... Yep, there you are. I can see you. Good evening.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for coming. And again, I think we've seen some of your email communication, which we've taken on board. Thank you. And we are listening this evening. So you'll have your time when I finish and you start. So over to you for your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. As background, I spoke as President of the Civic Society to the Planning Committee in February 2019, which considered the Alumno project. I was pleased that every member of the experienced Planning Committee turned down that application. I was unaware then that the night before some form of contract was signed with the applicant, linking our council and the applicant together in some manner. I am aware that the Planning Committee's decision was overturned to the public inquiry with very strict Grampian conditions applied. No convincing evidence that the student accommodation will bring any additional funding to the town has been demonstrated. The number of students coming to Colchester are dependent on the educational establishment's demand, not on bed space availability. So more bed space will not attract more students and therefore not increase students' spend in Colchester. The developer will make generous profits. The build spend will be appertained to any future development on the site. You are being asked to appropriate land to allow the Alumno development to proceed. do question the viability carefully. Even more, be aware that the appropriation takes away legal rights of way to various properties, including our very stretched National Health Service in relation to Open Road and National Health Service staff. Consider how you would feel if you received a letter from the council saying you are no longer allowed the vehicle access which you legally enjoy to your home, but have to park some distance away, not have access to services for your property, or to take delivery, or to receive speedy medical attention. You may be allowed to have a vehicle access to your home back in a couple of years. You will then need to ask the new leasehold owner of the adjoining land to open their barrier, which are notoriously apt at failure, to any visiting friend, emergency services and deliveries. What happens when your key fob fails late at night? Think how it would be if you were wheelchair dependent. Consider the stress this will cause and has caused to date to other human beings. Do not infringe the human rights of those affected by appropriation and the embarrassment such an action will place on the citizens of Colchester, some of whom you represent. Please refuse the request to appropriate land for a third-party developer. It may set a precedent. It is likely to infringe human rights. If I have a moment, Leader, I would just add the Civic Society did say most of the land was either bequeathed or sold to the council's predecessors at modest cost for community use, and the development more of the community rather than developers' profits should be considered. Much needed social or affordable housing would be far better use, hopefully with better design than that proposed. This would be close to the town, facilities and public transport for the less well off. The proposal will lead to more town centre traffic and overuse of Priory Street car park, which pre-pandemic was often at capacity. It is wrong for CBC to use legal powers to overturn covenants for access benefiting adjacent landowners. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, John. Again, another considered contribution there. I appreciate that, and we will answer as best as we can some of those comments you've put forward. When we come back to it, thank you. I will move on. I'll move back to Richard, please, our Democratic Services Officer, to please read out the next submission from Elia Valentini, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The submission's as follows. Can we have all the councillors to declare if they agree with this development going ahead, and if they do not, to spell out what they are prepared to do to avoid further subtraction of the land from the common good? This area could effectively be used for cultural and community enhancement purposes rather than for usual short-sighted and ill-planned commercial aims. How is the alumni development going to fit in to a strongly needed council urban green planning? And that's the end of the submission, Chairman.
Thank you for that. It's clear and concise, and thank you for reading again, Richard. I will move on to the next live speaker that we have. Hopefully Stephanie Nissen is here. Stephanie, let's see if you can come forward, please.
No, Chairman, she's not joined the meeting either, and we don't have a written submission from her, so we'll...
So it's really important if members of the public are listening to please write a written submission so that if you're not here, we will be able to contribute your thoughts. Unfortunately, with Stephanie, we won't be able to this evening. I'll just check on my notes. I think we have Jo Edwards, who said she may not be able to attend, and therefore I think we have a submission from her, but let's just check. Is Jo Edwards on the call this evening?
She's not, Chairman, no. We have a written submission from her which said she was happy if we circulated to Cabinet members. I can read it if you so wish.
Have you circulated that? I've read quite a few examples so far.
Yeah, it was in the ones I circulated to the Cabinet, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Therefore,
put it on the record.
Yes, do it.
Thank you. So, Richard, how?
Yep.
Can you read it out for me, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The Priory Area Residents Association includes amongst its membership those living on the High Street / Queen Street corner, whose properties have in the main enjoyed both pedestrian and vehicular rights of way over the land to the rear of 15 Queen Street for over 50 years. 3 years ago, I sold my childhood home there. Access to the rear of the properties was once through the passageway beside the brew house, a route no longer available as, following CBC's insistence that property owners should follow the route through the erstwhile bus park and the signing of the rights of way documents to legitimise this. The brew house route was sold and is now unavailable. I am raising this issue on behalf of residents, but businesses and charitable organisations have similar rights of way recorded in their deeds. Appropriation will cause huge disruption and untold stress to those whose rights of way are being removed entirely for at least 2 years. They know those rights of way will never be fully restored. They may be allowed access across the land, having negotiated a barrier with a fob, but what about visitors, carers, couriers, builders, emergency plumbers who can currently freely access the private parking spaces at the back of those properties? Are the householders forced to go out even if they are ill or the weather is bad or take days off work to let them through? Why should they? They have a formal, unimpeded right of way. What about unloading luggage, shopping, etc. from their vehicles or charging an electric car? I know to my cost that the area is very unpleasant at night. I was attacked by a man lurking in the dark in the back garden of my high street home, experienced a young soldier crashing through the glass of our French windows while being pursued by yobs, and replaced a front door kicked in by revellers. These things happen. Neither Queen Street nor East Hill are pleasant at night and will, I am sure, become worse rather than better if this development goes ahead. Priory Street can be equally intimidating. I live and park my car there, and although little phases me, on occasion I have felt very vulnerable. Residents need to be able to park as close to their properties as possible for their own safety and peace of mind. CVC appear to consider Priory Street car park infinitely expandable. It is not. Spaces would need to be allocated and secured, but fumbling with chain and padlock surrounded by drunken revellers is not for the faint-hearted. Vehicles get damaged. I can vouch for the fact that chili sauce removes paint from cars, that peeing on the door handles of parked cars is fun to do, and windscreens do not survive intact if jumped upon. Please recognise the implications of appropriation for both those living on this corner and those struggling to keep their businesses afloat. Put yourselves into their position. Please do the right thing and say no to appropriation. And that concludes the statement, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your contributions this evening to read out all of those residents who I also thank for their contributions this evening, some of whom live very close and have given their opinion on the matter. Thank you. I will move now to councillors, who I would say if you can keep your contributions to 3 minutes, that would be very helpful. We have a list of you, but also just to explain that I have appreciated the contributions from residents and members of the public this evening and how we stick to the facts as much as possible. I know there's been much talk about this current application, also about the involvement of the County Council, which we are working with, and there's been comments about taking them to court, etc., which we are not. So let's keep to the information, not misinformation. And I'll just explain that we are aware from the MP's tweet that he did write to the Secretary of State. That's what we're aware from a tweet. Disappointingly, he has not corresponded with us on that matter, but you may have seen that I have corresponded with him this evening in order to include him on our correspondence to the Secretary of State. Anyway, I will ask councillors to come in this order: Dundas, Goucher, Luxembourg and Oxford, please. So Paul first, over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. I'm here actually representing Councillor Simon Crowe on this item. He's working for Test Track and Trace this evening. As you might imagine, they're rather busy and he didn't really feel he could let them down. So he's given me a written statement to read out, which I shall read as quickly as I can. Here we are yet again talking about the 336 student rooms planned for the former bus park in Queen Street. Here tonight to talk about the council's plans to appropriate the land for this unwanted development. I want to talk tonight about the residents and businesses in the immediate area bordering the site who the council plan to deprive for a minimum of 2 years of their legal rights to vehicular access to their properties as set out in their deeds. Or to allow a developer unfettered access to the site, the plans for which the council's own planning committee threw out and from which the council will earn a paltry annual income. These residents and businesses will be barred from parking at their properties. Their visitors will be barred from parking at their properties. Delivery drivers will be barred from parking at their properties. They will not be able to charge electric vehicles. They will not be able to wash their cars, which will not be parked securely at their properties. These are amongst numerous other freedoms to which they have the legal right that the council plans to snatch from them to please the developer, which will also make their properties unsaleable for the duration of the build. They will be offered parking spaces in Priory Street car park several minutes walk away. from which they will have to carry their shopping and, when necessary at times, walk to and from their vehicles late at night in the dark. It is not even guaranteed that there will even be parking spaces for them in Priory Street when they need them. And just to rub their noses in it, they are not being offered parking spaces at the much closer RCP car park on East Hill that they can actually see from their front windows. Probably because this is a privately operated facility for which there would no doubt be a cost to the council or developer, unlike the council-owned Priory Street car park where there is no cost. And to add insult to injury, not only will they have a view of what looks like a modern prison to greet them when they look out of their back windows, when they finally can access the rear of their properties, their access will be blocked by bollards, which they will also have to operate before they can park. Bollards that they will have to rush out and operate each and every time they have visitors and deliveries. Last week, I was made aware of a conversation on Twitter in which a member of this cabinet was talking about me saying that I've only recently become interested in this matter to win votes for my mate in May's local elections. As he well knows, I've been fighting this development for 2.5 years now, doing what I was elected to do, representing residents and businesses in my ward, including members of his own political party, who have been filling my inbox with their concerns ever since the floor consultation in which myself and fellow ward councillor at the time, Councillor Darius Laws, were not consulted. This incident sadly puts into words the council's indifference to the worry and stress it is causing these residents and business owners. Not least of all during a global pandemic when, like most of us, they probably have already had enough on their plates to cope with. Although the not inconsiderable inconvenience, along with the not inconsiderable inconvenience, this is planned that they will have to endure for at least 2 years and beyond. So to address just one specific concern, could the councillor responsible for public safety who made this remark please tell us if he thinks it is acceptable to put residents, which sometimes could very well include vulnerable people and women on their own, in a position where they will have to walk around the town in the dark late at night. That's from Councillor Simon Crowe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas, and Councillor Crowe via you. Thank you. Okay, I'll move on to Councillor Gocher, please. Mark.
Good evening, Chair. First of all, just to say that I've just heard from one of the previous speakers, Stephanie Nissen, who wasn't here, just to say that she hasn't been emailed the details of the meeting. That's what I've been told anyway, so I'm just passing that on because obviously it's an issue. But anyway, just to answer another previous comment from Elia Valentini. No, I don't agree with this development, as you'll probably be surprised to know. And yes, I think the land should remain in public purpose use. My idea would be for a public square with mixture of green and free space. But that's just to answer a previous comment. But of course, I have no say in this because although I'm a ward councillor for Castle Ward, where this development is being plonked, I'm not on the cabinet. And as Sir Bob said, there are 51 elected councillors, and yet only 8 people will decide this because of the system that the council operates. And because I don't happen to be on the Politburo cabinet, whatever you wish to call it, I, as ward councillor, have no say. And to me, that is a democratic deficit. But moving further on, first of all, the appropriation. Like Councillor Barber, I seem to recall in the summer getting an assurance that the council was not going to appropriate the land. Now we're discussing the appropriation of the land. So I'd like an answer as to why and why that seems to contradict previous statements. Secondly, the application was rejected by the planning committee, primarily on the grounds of disabled access in the section next to the Roman wall. And to my understanding, that issue has yet to be sorted out by the developers. Now, obviously, if I'm wrong, then please correct me. But as I understand it, that has not been sorted. So how is that going to be sorted to enable compliance with the Disability Act so the slope is not too steep and at the same time to avoid knocking down parts of the Roman wall, which of course is ruled out by English heritage. But I mainly represent residents, and residents have contacted me about the issue of access to their properties, which has been covered by Councillor Crowe. But I've been contacted as ward councillor about that as well, and about the issue of sale of the former tourist information centre. So how are you going to address the concerns of those residents about inability to access the rear of their properties? The bollard system, which frankly sounds a ridiculous imposition on those residents. How is that issue going to be addressed? Because that is what is concerning the residents that I speak to, who live nearby that development the most. In terms of the conditions that the inquiry put on the development when the inspector overruled the planning committee, I would like to hear from the cabinet an assurance that all of those conditions have been met, because the inspector allows this to go ahead with conditions. So have those conditions actually been met? Can you go through them, please? And can you tell me whether each and every one of those conditions has been met to allow this to go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goetsch. I would expect sometimes to ensure we use language that is positive. I know that your party usually is into that kind of principle. Make sure when you're describing the democratic institutions, you describe them in a way that isn't vexatious, please. Okay, we will answer some of those questions, of course, as we are noting them all down. Thank you. I'll just take up in particular the accessibility point, which is absolutely vital, and those conditions that would have to be adhered to for this development to go ahead. And that is absolutely what we would expect and what we will make sure happens if this proceeds. So the accessibility issues would be corrected, and that's what the inspector wanted, and that's what the developer would have to do. Moving on, let me just check who is next. It's Councillor Luxford Vaughan, please. Andrea?
Just to reiterate my position, I think it's totally the wrong development. I always have done. I think Mark has a very good point that if it was put to a vote, there is absolutely no way this council would support it, because most of us have already expressed a view that it's the wrong development. When I was on cabinet, I was obviously this issue came up, and I was told, you know, I had the situation explained to me that we were in a bit of a pickle because someone had signed a contract, maybe not a great decision at the time, but that was where we were. So I understood, and I understand now the difficulties you face. But it was explained to me that as long as we made reasonable endeavours to try and resolve this issue for the contractor, then we would have served our part of the contract, and we would be getting out of this situation, that we most certainly would not be taking legal action. And yet I find myself here tonight, and that is the question before you. And I don't understand why we need to be in this situation. I think many of our speakers have made some great contributions tonight, but I bring up what Dorian and others have pointed out, that you do need full planning permission, not conditional. I know that Alumno have come to planning with pre-app stuff that they wanted to comment on, and I sat in on that meeting. There were two options. One was not to comply with building regs at all, and the other one was to knock a dirty great big hole in the historic wall. Now, we've just said how important that is to us with the capital programme, so neither of those are viable. I don't think they can resolve the issue, actually. Which is good news. It means we don't have to do this. We shouldn't be compromising. I think there's some very salient points about, what this will bring. It's not in the public interest. It's developer-led. Student houses don't deliver any affordable homes, and they don't actually contribute very well to our numbers, because the calculations, it's not. I don't even think it's a third. But I have got something positive to say. Which is, we have in our strategic priorities also to build a youth zone. Because of the town deal, we have got a huge amount of funding to go towards that. At the moment, ECC are still in negotiation, as far as I understand, about making a contribution. But if they were presented with a scheme in the centre of town that was in the public interest that they could support, I'm sure that they could at least be embarrassed into making the shortfall up. If not, chuck a couple of luxury apartments on this. Those people will be paying full rates. They will count against our housing numbers, and there'll be less of them, and they're probably more likely to have disposable cash to spend in the town, as the kids will. Let's face it, if we want to put a youth zone anywhere, it has to go in the centre of town. Nothing else is going to work. It's got to be accessible for all our kids on public transport. So what about we throw in a bus station? Brilliant idea. It's a great location for a bus station. Don't forget, if we pass the local plan and the RTS goes ahead, we're going to have 20 odd buses, additional buses an hour going through the centre of town. We need somewhere for them to go. At the moment, you know, if you had a bus station where they could sit and pick people up rather than masses of queues on the high street, you can take air pollution. You can fix so many problems by saying, yes, we've done the reasonable endeavours. We don't have to do any more. We don't like the plan anyway. Let's all be honest. None of us like it. It's a rubbish plan. And we can provide something that we're all committed to. I know you don't like my ideas, but I think this one you've actually all bought into anyway. So how about we give that one a whirl?
Thank you, Andrea. Useful contributions, and I will absolutely agree about youth zone. We're looking in the town centre for. So I think that means we go on to Councillor Gerard Oxford as the last speaker, and I just hope David's got enough notepad for all of the scribbles and the questions that have been asked so far. So let me just double check. Yep, Councillor Oxford, please. Gerard, once again this evening, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I seem to have been talking about this site for years. I was on the original planning committee that refused it. In fact, I seconded the motion. There's been a further planning meeting recently where they were trying to get an approval for the slope, the ramp, which was refused again outright. So there is no approval. I'm still very, very concerned about access issues, and also I'm concerned about the Minories, because the wheelchair access for the Minories is in through the rear. So it's very close to where this area is. And of course there are others. I mean, local residents you could have people in wheelchairs or on Zimmer frames, on crutches, whatever. It's inconveniencing them. And when the planning application went to the appeal, the Essex County Council said it was unsafe to come from Priory Street, as a pedestrian this is, unsafe to come from Priory Street round into Queen Street. You would need to go down Priory Street and up East Hill. I measured it, it's 0.6 of a mile. I can't see anybody trying to carry their goods of whatever sort from their vehicles in Priory Street to their homes 0.6 of a mile. It's part of it uphill too. Where I do think the Cabinet has done really well is I consider that the Cabinet have made all reasonable endeavours. So therefore, to me, you've met the terms of that contract. I don't agree with the contract. It was poor and remains poor. But I believe you've made all reasonable efforts. You should not be seeking appropriation. And I'm afraid you should be telling Alumno, we've tried everything we can. We're not prepared to go any further. Thank you very much. Good night. And then perhaps open up for a public consultation about what Andrea's just said about possibly having a youth zone on that site instead. But I just say there's still serious issues regarding access. In fact, I went to the Ombudsman with the access issue last year, and I still haven't had a response from so they haven't ruled it out through the Ombudsman about my complaints about lack of access from this site. So I just think that you should just say, sorry, thank you very much. We have done everything. And I believe, and to be honest, I believe that David and yourself in particular, on behalf of the Cabinet, have done more than enough to have shown that you've tried. And I just think now it's a case of good night, Vienna. Thank you.
Wouldn't mind a trip to Vienna. Thank you, Gerard, again for your contributions, and thank you all for your contributions. As councillors and as residents, this is an issue where we are taking on board lots of comments, but there's also many people out there who have not come to speak today, who may be more positive or negative, etc. But we have had contributions in the background via email as well. At this point, I just want to give David a few moments to gather his thoughts as the key portfolio holder who will respond. I will also go to other portfolio holders who have some responsibility in the area and some responsibility to respond to some of the questions. And I know we've all been asked to give our view as well. What I would ask now is for councillors, visiting councillors, to please mute their microphones and put their screen to blank. And can I ask the visiting members of the public, please, to leave the meeting and go to the YouTube channel to watch the rest of the meeting at this point. And thank you again for all of those contributions. We will address all of them as best as we can in a rounded way that shows we are taking on board those comments. Thank you. I'll give those opportunity for people to leave and then to come back on the YouTube channel so they can listen intently to the rest of the debate. And I'm aware of the time. We have about 20 minutes and then we'll go for a break. So we'll see if we can fit in all of David's answers. So I'll go to you shortly, David. But first of all, I'll just bring in the monitoring officer because I think there's a letter from the County Council that we should share. And also, when the monitoring officer comes in as the head of the legal team as well, I'd ask Andrew Weavers, the monitoring officer, to please just explain some of the constitutional matters that were raised in particular by Dorian Kelly and Alan Short about the vote this evening, the appropriation matters and the Cabinet going forward with this as a potential to be used in the future. So Andrew, could I bring you forward now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll start off with, as you say, addressing the constitutional issues that were raised. And Alan Short raised the issue about whether Cabinet should be dealing with this at all. I would say he's absolutely right about the Council's constitution, stating that the Cabinet has no remit regarding planning. That's absolutely right. The problem with this issue is it is not about planning. The issue before you tonight in relation to Queen Street is about the council acting as landowner, and accordingly the Cabinet has the ability to deal with that in accordance with the Constitution and in accordance with the law. I know there was the other point around the use of the Section 203 powers to override the rights and whether or not a planning consent should be unconditional at that time, and I would agree with that. But that's in relation to the use of the powers, not in relation to the decision to appropriate. They are two separate decisions. Chair, if that's okay, can I go on to the Essex County Council letter?
Yes, if you don't mind, just on that last point. So therefore it'd be another step to take would be sort of the 203 sort of actions beyond this decision. So we're not actually talking about enacting those at this point.
No, but the recommendation, one of your recommendations alludes to it. Chair, I don't know if the portfolio holder wanted to say something before I talk about the Essex County Council letter.
I had intended that, Andrew, but this is we're in a fluid evening as we're finding out. So there is an opportunity for you later. I'll bring you back in if I think we need that. I think I'll say for everybody listening, members and otherwise, the most important thing for all of us on Cabinet, and I know Andrew, you and other senior officers will feel the same, is that we are thoughtful about what we do. So for my part, I have no difficulty. Your evening will disappear for you, Andrew, in bringing you back on later as necessary. But I would like, Leader, just to sort of hammer home the last point, because there is such a lot of misunderstanding and we can find ourselves in that position as well. This is about transferring land from surplus to another category. It has the title appropriation. It's for planning purposes. The decision on its exercise follows. And we've been very clear, it's been said, I've said it, and we'll say it again tonight, that what we're doing now is getting to that first step. We are absolutely committed. We've been misunderstood or misrepresented. It's a mixture, I think, but let's call it misunderstanding, that we're racing off now to override everybody's individual rights. Our focus is on mitigation, agreement, and dialogue, but it is true, it is in the papers that we're acquiring, as I would put it, the power to so act if we can get nowhere. And that is absolutely not exceptional, because it would mean that any one person with the right seen, glimpsed, or somebody coming, out of the woodwork who nobody has found could stop an urban development. That would make no sense. And my understanding, limited as it is, this case law has been very clear about that. So just say this up front, say it again. This is deeply hurtful for many people. It's not what they want, and it impacts on them. Absolutely get that. We'll walk up and down this, won't we? Again, as we respond. But Andrew's very right to remind us, as I do now, we're not gung-ho on off. We're just getting ourselves to the next step and stage, and the hope still is that we can find a way that doesn't require us to go to combat or to exercise the authority we necessarily have to acquire to ourselves. I hope that's correct, Andrew, and helpful.
Thank you, David. I will go back to Andrew now, just so we have to put on record, and I think it's absolutely right to do so, the Essex County Council letter. Then David, I'll come back to you, but I appreciate that contribution. Thank you. Back to you, Andrew, then back to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, we received a letter from Essex County Council, which has been circulated to all Cabinet members and will be subsequently published on our website, as it is a formal objection to the appropriation process. I need to talk you through some of the issues raised in that letter, because that letter invited me to consider whether, as monitoring officer, I should exercise my powers under Section 5 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989 to stop the Cabinet making the decision on the report. And this would be on the basis that the decisions taken could give rise to a contravention of any enactment or rule of law. Having taken my own legal advice, it is my view that the Cabinet should continue to consider the report, as I do not believe that such a contravention is likely to be made. And I'm going to go on to a bit more detail with some of the issues that were raised in the Essex letter. The letter, first of all, talked about consultation. There were comments regarding lack of consultation, which we do not accept. We are in an ongoing dialogue on this issue, which has been going on for months, if not years, which is acknowledged in the report, and which this letter helpfully forms part of that. The dialogue included our intentions in relation to appropriate and our wish to be able to come to an agreement. There is no statutory requirement for consultation when a local authority decides to appropriate land under Section 122 of the Local Government Act 1972. The duty to consult arises when a local authority intends to appropriate land which comprises open space, and we have complied with that requirement. The letter also highlighted incorrect application of the legal tests. We do not accept the position here. The report at paragraph 4.7 makes it clear that the development would bring economic, social and environmental well-being benefits to the council's area. The letter also highlighted some material considerations, of which we do not accept the majority of the points made. This report is dealing with a land transaction and it's not reciting the planning history of the site. But one issue I do want to address is the reference in the letter to Section 40 of the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, which places a duty on all public authorities in England and Wales to have regard in the exercise of their functions to the purpose of conserving biodiversity. The Cabinet should consider this in the context of exercising their functions covered in this report, including potential appropriation of the land. The functions being considered are not those relating to the consideration of granting of a planning permission, but the matter of biodiversity was considered at that stage, and the report at that time noted, and I'm afraid I'm going to read out these paragraphs from the report because it's important that you understand this. This was paragraph 15.60. The planning application is supported by a preliminary ecological assessment, which is supplemented by specialist surveys, bats, stag beetles, and lichens. The ecological assessment concludes that the habitats and plant species that are present on the application site are of negligible value. Given this, the report states that there is potential to significantly enhance the site for wildlife through the provision of bat and bird boxes, native species planting, and the provision of a vertical log pile for stag beetles. In addition to the above, the introduction of green roofs and the landscaping of the student courtyards also offer material ecological benefits. The report goes on, the application site is within a zone of influence of a European designated site, and in order to comply with the Habitats and Species Regulations 2017 as amended, mitigation of any recreational impact will be required in accordance with the draft Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance Avoidance Mitigation Strategy, also known as RAMS, and this will equate to a financial contribution that can be secured via Section 106 agreement. Subject to conditions to secure ecological enhancement measures, it is considered that the proposed development accords with adopted policy ENV1 and the requirements of the NPPPF, which seek to minimise impacts on biodiversity and, where possible, to provide net gains in biodiversity. It is considered that given there is limited ecological value of the current site, and there is potential of regeneration to improve its biodiversity, that there is no extra concerns raised by the potential decisions recommended in this report that would have any significant adverse impact on conserving biodiversity. Finally, the main other issue that I want to raise is equalities. The letter mentions that the report sets out the requirements of Section 149 of the Equality Act 2010 and the fact there is a link to an EQIA which relates to the Colchester Borough Council Asset Management Plan 2016-21. The letter points out that this is a high-level impact assessment which does not cover the equality impacts of the development itself. Accordingly, the following factors are of particular relevance to members in considering the recommendations in the report before you. The public sector equality duty is a continuing duty which members must consider and review at all stages of decision making. Officers have considered the effect of deciding to progress with appropriation and development of the land on those with protected characteristics. There will be a temporary disruption to those rights holders in being able to access the car park area and the rear of their premises parking during the construction period. Although officers are seeking to negotiate a solution with First Sight on being able to utilise Lewis Gardens for these equality impact purposes, the position needs to be considered on the assumption that this may not be possible. This will be particularly onerous for those rights holders who are disabled and or elderly or who may have issues with walking a longer distance to get to their home from Priory Street car park, for example, pregnant women. There is also a health and safety implication for all rights of way holders in having to walk from Priory Street car park to their homes, especially at night. If we are unable to successfully negotiate the use of Lewis Gardens with First Sight, there is no alternative vehicular access possible to the car park area during the construction period. Every effort will be made to try and find a solution to assist any right-of-way holders and others with protected characteristics and those who feel unsafe in walking from Priory Street car park. So in conclusion, Chair, Cabinet should now proceed to consider the report, taking into account this further advice. Thank you, Chair.
Andrew, that was really, really helpful. Thank you. Because we are all worried and concerned about some of the issues that you've just explained. And actually, it really does reassure us in terms of the equalities aspect, accessibility, and about the environmental and biodiversity impacts. So that actually was a really in-depth explanation. I thank you for taking the time to give that to us. That has reassured me in particular. Thank you. At this point, we're at about 5 to 8, and David, I will actually come to you and just ask, would you prefer to contribute for the time that you have in terms of lots of contributions and responses now, and then we can take a break after you've spoken and we can all contribute then, or would you prefer to have a break now? It's up to you.
I think, Chair, that the sensible thing to do, if I may say this, is have a brief break now. I want to be really thoughtful about walking through this, as I said earlier. I will invite, and I'll say it again, members and officers, and there's 1 or 2 places where I will ask a question or two, so that we just have a rounded walkthrough. And then again, we will stop, won't we, and say, is there anything we think we've missed, and before we go on. So let's break now. It will take us, some time, I think, to give this due justice, and that's before we turn to the report itself, Chair.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate Andrew's words then. So some of the issues that he's raised again afterwards, but let's go with that. I'm happy to do that, to have a break now, and if we can return at approximately 8 minutes past 8, I'd appreciate that, so we can start back with the meeting at about 10 past 8. Thank you. We'll take a short break now, and we'll return just before 10 past 8. Thank you. So I'll just say a 1 minute warning, and I hope we can start the feed again and pick up where we left off. So I'll ask Cabinet members please to return with their video on so we can see everybody contributing. I will go straight back to Councillor King to respond shortly.
I might turn my camera and speaker off then.
Richard, can I check we are still running with the feed, or if we do need to restart that we are on?
The feed is still running, Chairman.
Good, okay, thank you. Well, welcome back to the second part of our Cabinet meeting this evening. We were mid-flow on the Alumno issue, which is the third-party matters relating to Queen Street, Colchester. And I return back to Councillor David King, who takes the main responsibility as portfolio holder for this development and has done a lot of the work, taken the notes from the meetings, representations from the public and councillors this evening. So I thank David for listening intently to that, and we will all, I'm sure, contribute. I'll move to David shortly, but when we do all contribute, just please be mindful, as visiting public members were, of this issue. It's contentious, and the feelings of those involved, and be respectful as best as possible. Thank you. David, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. And absolutely, that's the tone that between ourselves and today we know is right. These issues matter. They're personal to people, and they're personal. They feel they cut to people who feel impacted, and it's very understandable why. First, before I attempt to address the issues, let me just, if I may, Leader, to talk how I'd like to walk through this. We first of all do as we've agreed, respond to the have your say speakers. I've got probably from the dozen speakers a number of composite points, and I'll address them that way. There's some specifics. If I give a bit more time or attention to any one speaker, if they listen or if they don't, it'll only be because their point might be a little different to the others, but my aim will be to give, as you'd expect, a fair response. I would then like to just turn to colleagues on the call. If you think I've missed anything, let me know. I'd like to cross-check also with officers, and so that's the way I like to do this. So we just make sure we've got a couple of cracks at making sure we do justice to what we've heard. Very mindful. But as you referred to, Leader, as did one or two of those who spoke tonight, like Dorian Kelly, a lot of work has gone in and been recognised by others in terms of making sure the council and our officers really do understand the perspectives, whether they're agreed or not, whether they're always factual isn't the point. They're legitimate, they deserve attention. I believe they've had it, but we've got the next opportunity tonight. So if that's okay, then I'll start, if I might.
Yep, thank you, David. Carry on.
You'll have to excuse me dipping down and trying to make sense of what I've taken note of. I mean, the first and most obvious thing to say is, a really sincere thank you on behalf of all the Cabinet and for myself personally to all of those time and trouble to speak tonight and write in. And I absolutely know that for some of them it had to be easy, and they've had to take time. They've had to revisit their views, confirm them before they put them into us tonight, or they read them out to us. So I'm really grateful. So thank you, all the councillors, High Steward, Sir Bob Russell, Alan Short, and Dorian Kelly, who are great respondents in many correspondence in many matters. And of course, I think it's particularly important, Leader, that we acknowledge residents who have written in. We'll come to them in terms of the paper in a moment, but those who have written in today, as I say, this is very, very real for them. And I and you will be aware that if, as we believe, this development brings many benefits, not least employment, it also brings disruption, worry and inconvenience. Our obligation is to make sure we understand that, weigh that carefully and do all we can to mitigate. Okay, so when I address what I think is the composite points, as I've said, if people don't hear their name mentioned, it's only because it's come from somebody else. I want to give acknowledgement to all, But I want to also acknowledge that because it's been said 3 times or 5, doesn't make it any less heartfelt or valid or real and deserving our attention. I know that's our intent to try and do. The first point I wanted to take, because several raised it, was actually the authority to act. Alan Short and Dorian Kelly and Councillor Lewis, among others, raised this point, reference to older boroughs and all the rest of it. And I had intended to talk to that, but I think the monitoring officer has been very clear that both in terms of the way in which authority is vested, we are consistent with it. This is not about planning. This is about land ownership, and it follows commercial arrangements for development, regeneration, which absolutely are central authorities and obligations of council and cabinet. That's been, I believe, that's been dealt with, whether it's accepted or not. I believe that's been dealt with very adequately by the monitoring officer. I think the reference to the planning committee does, however, deserve a particular additional reference from us, and that's to just acknowledge the importance of the role they play. Nothing that we have done, seek to do, or do tonight will, at least knowingly, we've had assurance on that, independent assurance on that, cut across their role or their responsibility. So I don't see, as I say, that we should, on this issue, on the advice and the knowledge we have, consider that we have a challenge that would take us off the current course, or cause us to consider that we should stop what, frankly, has been suggested, what we should do. They played a very full role, after all, in this, did they not? And despite the fact the administration was clear what it wanted to happen, it showed its independence. It rejected the planning permission application. It had to go to an independent inspector, and we, Cabinet, supported them in that process, even though it was contrary to our view of what was the right thing to do. I genuinely think that we've shown an acknowledgement of separation of power and authority, if I put it that way, but we've acted as we should. If I go on from that sort of central point about what we can do, should do, our role and responsibilities, I'd just like to sort of go through it in the way I noted it. So Matthew Mastriani and Elia Valentini were among those who don't like, and there are many, who don't like the design, don't like the location, don't think it fits with some of the things we say we want to do. I think some of the language was unsympathetic to the location. I think we must really acknowledge that the development divides opinion. I mean, that is really plain tonight, and also why. But I would, in a hopefully considered way, say there is a lot that a neutral might welcome, including access to the Roman wall and a second publicly accessible square. And I am pleased to confirm, as I have done to Dorian Kelly, who raised this among other points, that subject only to the usual licensing approaches, we would very much welcome those squares, if this development proceeds, being used, as has been suggested, for public events, theatre and or live music. That would be, in my view, fantastic. And I find the design more attractive than some, although it wasn't for me to take a view. I think the setting could be, certainly isn't better than what we have now. The core of many of the challenges to what we're seeking to do go around access. And that's very understandable. Visiting councillors raised it, so did John Burton at length, and with his usual eloquence, and also, as any would, if they had these inconveniences, so did Jennifer Brown, who set out, and it, emotionally, I'll be frank, it sort of caught my attention because it was real things that affect any family or any person, about the inconveniences, and there are many, if you can't gain access to the rear of your home. Mrs. Brown, I noted, like others, like Joe Edwards, also called into question mitigations like free access to Priory Street car park, listing incidents there, and they sounded terrible, of real concern. They would worry any of us. They should be rare, I can't judge that, but we must accept that all residents will not be comfortable, not all of them will be comfortable late at night walking from car park to home, even if it's just a few minutes away. And the fair supplementary points being made tonight by the monitoring officer that there is a particular duty for us to consider our equalities and disabilities duties for those with protected characteristics. If you can't walk very far, walking 7 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it might be, you know, will feel a long way and it will be uncomfortable. I think this is one thing that for me, I suggest we do take away. It's entirely consistent with what we're doing tonight, which is to take one step, but not take the final step of exercising the rights that we're seeking to acquire for planning purposes. We should look again at what else we might be able to do to help alternative car parking should mitigation and the way it's been described and the way we'll address later on and not be possible in full. Many of the speakers talked about the period development and then look beyond it. But I think we ought to, just staying with development, acknowledge that in addition to alternative car parking and loading bay arrangements, we have secured first sites agreement to daytime access via Lewis Gardens, and on behalf of all of us, I thank them for that help to their neighbours. We are exploring whether this might be extended, and this is an opportunity rather than address it later. If Councillor Young has anything else to add on that, I will pause and defer to her. But I am hopeful that progress made or in prospect will be a very significant relief to the concerns expressed and will, I think, underpin our approach, which is to get there by conversation in a helpful way. Julie, have you anything you can share at this time?
Thank you, David, to the opportunity to come in here. I just restrict my comments at this stage to that particular point that you're referring to. I think Jennifer Brown seemed to be unaware of any negotiations that may have taken place to provide better access to her property via Lewis Gardens. And there is active discussions ongoing with First Sight, how that can be managed in a way that meets the needs of those residents and the needs of First Sight. And I think we're making good progress on that. First Sight naturally need to protect the front of their gallery and the free flow of people walking to and from the gallery. And then those people walking to the gallery not being impeded by passing cars. However, I think, you know, in negotiation between those residents and First Sight and our officers, I hope that we can settle on a solution that best meets the needs of all those three groups of people. I understand that there's talk of a barrier which is card operated, which would be on a restricted time scale, as I say, to protect the interests of First Sight, but also to allow those residents access to the back of their properties.
Thank you, Julie. If there's an opportunity to return to this, if you want to add to this, we could do that between us, can't we? But I think this, I hope this will be, I do have a kind of point of detail, which I don't understand why this has not been understood. I thought it had been communicated. That's something we're away from here. We'll follow up. And I think every resident, not all of them, very good reason, will be listening in to us tonight or any night. But we need to make sure that they do hear from the joint agents, New Steer, in very clear terms. So once we've got to where we can get to, we should let them know. And indeed, if there is going to be any gap, and there may be a time needed for conversation of detail, we can at least get out this very welcome first step, which is, you know, agreement in principle over a degree of access, and that alone will start to ease at least some of the problems which have been adequately described. Thank you. I'd like colleagues just to refer to accessibility in the longer term. So there was references to bollards, safety and practicality, and some of you have seen letters and emails also elaborating some of those practical realities. I have in a reply said, because I understand it to be true, those problems, if you have a good design and if it's well maintained, are rare or slight. There certainly should be avoidable. We should be able to ensure there is a regime, as others have touched on, that works. And if so, there can be, independently is said, benefit. It gives you more security and safety after the development if you've got restrictions to those who don't have the right to be coming up towards somebody's rear entrances. So I think there is a duty on us to acknowledge that we have to make sure, if this development proceeds, that it's done absolutely to the standard and maintained to the standard that's necessary. And if so, I think the hope that this will be taken as a genuine assurance on our part that that in itself is not an obstacle. It may even, as I've described, have some benefit. So Bob Russell raised a number of specifics, or raised for him, and I think because they're so fundamental that it would be worth me spending just a few minutes walking through them. So his first concern was about the relationship between us and Essex County Council. And here I think, and I don't, you will know how neutral I am about these things. I think we certainly feel rather strung along, because this is a conversation of many months, in depth, at different times in those many months, in those several years. And we had an expectation, maybe we were wrong, but we had an expectation that County would be helpful, County would confirm an agreement reached in 2019, that County would give us an alternative, and they've given you, Leader, and us as yet nothing. But I am really grateful they have at least been clear about the fact that that is the space that we have to fill between us. And I should add, shouldn't I, that of course we've provided them access, information, ability to look at the site. We know what we know informally, but that's of course no good at all. We've asked them to share their assessment, share what's possible in this place, and you have offered, Leader, to meet again, to speak again. And I think it's important we say this. So to Sir Bob, if you hear this, we agree. Local authorities shouldn't fall out any more than they need. You acknowledge that they do sometimes, and given your past stellar career, including House of Commons, you will absolutely understand that happens a lot. It doesn't happen much for us. We get on well. The relationship, in my view, is better than it has been. This is an exception. We have to have a dialogue to resolve it. So Bob suggests, as others do, that the human rights of residents are being taken away for the benefit of a developer. Now, my language, but that balance is part of what we're looking at. It's addressed within the papers. It will be weighed again tonight. If we proceed, it will be because we accept the case, in my language, has been demonstrably made that the public good warrants a temporary but real inconvenience to others. Mindful also, we need to say this again, their rights are returned after construction and with statutory compensation. I accept that isn't what interests people, but it's the right thing to do. And it's not to dismiss those inconveniences that we seek to mitigate as fully as we can. They're real. But the rights do return. It's our obligation, and we've accepted it, to make sure that what they return to will work for them as residents and work well. So Bob's also concerned we may not have acted with sufficient transparency with respect to the sale of the former Tourist Information Centre. To my knowledge, that's just not the case. The sale was in the knowledge of potential for development, and the implication there's something underhand in here in contract signature before planning committee. Again, to my knowledge, that can't be right. The planning committee, after all, did reject the proposal, and planning permission followed only on independent appeal. So there's a conflation here which I don't think is correct or right. I may ask later on in Vipond perhaps to just rehearse the differences, because they are significant between agreement to lease, contract, and actually the lease itself, all of which are in sort of stages in time. The economics were addressed to be dismissed by a number of the speakers, and that's been true also in some of the correspondence before we got to this point. It includes Alan Short and Mr. John Burton, as well as Dorian. As you will know, I've had a number of detailed exchanges on this. And again, I think there is some meeting of minds. We don't seem now to be disagreeing that students spend more than often they're given. Bank of mum and dad, sometimes borrowing, sometimes worse sources, but they will spend. There's a lot of evidence about how much and where it's spread. And it is undoubtedly true that a proportion that gets spent locally. Food, drink, bars, retail. And then you're just down to a conversation about whether you think that's an additional net benefit. I'm really clear, and I've looked at this with in real depth. There has to be a net benefit. There is no ready alternative to this. This will take demand. It may grow it a bit because location is one of the things that students look at when they choose a course. Marketed well, and alumni are let's say for them, an award-winning student accommodation provider. They will market it well. We have every reason to think that they will influence some choices of individual students who will come into the very heart of Colchester. And alongside that hotel, we will have visitors, tourists, family and friends of those students coming right into the heart of Colchester. I accept it's a debate about how much. That's why I've used a range that's less than alumni's number, 2 to 3 million. That is still a significant and lasting economic benefit. I genuinely think that case is met. I've asked also and shared with some of the correspondents, including several tonight, for an analysis of the 60 jobs that's been particularly criticised, that's been quoted as coming with a development. I won't trouble colleagues with that in full, although Mark, you've seen it, but it breaks down to a number of different roles across 3 points of employment: running the student development, running the hotel, running the commercial units and business units that are enclosed inside development, and of course recognising that both the student development and the hotel are 24/7 operations. I thought that was compelling, as also the quite modest calculations by Travelodge of what every visitor who spends time with them will spend again in the centre of the town. I think that we are in a very sound place. But there's something really important about rounding this out, because the focus, and Councillor Barber talked about this, about the minuscule financial return. That focus, it is understandable, but it's with respect, it's not the right one. We're not doing this for commercial gain. This has not come to us from officers because of commercial gain. It's come to us because it's about regeneration. Our commercial gains include, financial gains include things we don't need to talk about: the homes bonus, business rates, council tax, as well as the ones we have. Footfall and benefit to the town centre, which itself keeps businesses rolling and draws into the council and the wider economy a benefit. No, this is regeneration. This is investment, creates jobs, supports jobs, unlocks other investment elsewhere, makes us an attractive destination rather than not. I think that it's a misunderstanding to just look at the cash receipt for the reasons I've described. That was not the purpose. I don't think it's been described as that before. This is all about the wider economic benefits that we would gain, the town and those who want a job and want to keep it will gain if this kind of development, if we agree, takes the next step and eventually gets delivered. I think that will be my all but 3 or 4 of the points, if you bear with me, colleagues. I want to give justice to those who are waiting to see whether I've tried to address their points or not. And my apologies to Richard Clifford, whose hand must now be aching. There's a conversation, and Dorian Kelly mentioned this, about the moral dimension, the balance to be considered. I think that's that I hope we were doing tonight, whether we disagree on any of the individual points, by recognising inconvenience, mitigation, and the benefits that become, which is referred to earlier, are economic and social and wider. I think I'll probably be there. I want to acknowledge that Andrea Luxford Vaughan repeated some of the points that we just walked through, that she has reaffirmed her support for youth zones and sees this as a, she could have at least half a point, an attractive potential place for such an investment. But here's the issue. This site has not attracted, not found a workable design solution or use since it was first marketed in 2005. We have to, in considering what's right in the widest possible sense for the borough, we have to look at practical alternatives. And it'll be right in that context, given that Andrea refers to county and their position, to also acknowledge, as we've discussed before, that we're open to those alternatives. We have seen none. A wasteland, an empty space, or even, as some have suggested, just turning it to public realm, in my view, that would be a huge loss of opportunities. Now, we've talked already about biodiversity. That was touched on by one of the speakers who talked about Greening of Colchester, how this, one of our happy say speakers, and we've addressed that with the monitoring officers' remarks as we should. There seems to be opportunity here, and certainly that would be consistent, Mark, with the way that we approach our obligations as a leading, if I can use a shorthand, green council with the right kind of instincts, woodland and biodiversity project included. And I think lastly, I would want to acknowledge that Gerard Oxford, who knows these challenges very personally, did touch on, again addressed by the monitoring officer, disabilities obligations, and has given to us, I think, a need to be thoughtful about whether the development in its detail will meet those. I think the understanding we have, and it's advice we might want to go back to, is that they do, or that's one of the things we must ensure does happen when the detail of the development is reaffirmed. That leader, for me, I hope is a good first crack at the many points raised and grouped together. And my apologies for those who don't feel that they deserved, haven't got the attention they deserved, and those who felt they got too much. Can I ask colleagues and you, leader, whether there's anything we think in particular we've missed from the lengthy set of observations and conversation that followed?
Thank you, David. I think you've given a really thoughtful and in-depth explanation and answer to as many of the points as possible. So I thank you for that. I have got hands up from other cabinet members who have come in and contribute, and I'm sure we'll try and close any gaps where we feel that's necessary. I would say that the youth zone we are all supportive of. For two reasons. I feel that this site is not substantial enough in size. Some of us have visited the youth zones that we have got close to us and seen that, but also that in terms of appropriation rights, they would also be required and needed to carry out a development of a youth zone as well. I will go to Councillor Julie Young and then to Councillor Mike Lilly.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think none of us around this table, if we were around a table, are going to take this decision lightly. In many cases, you wouldn't start from here, would you? And I know, this has been a really painful journey for a lot of people involved in this conversation. And, it's been debated and debated, not only in the cabinet, but in various forums, in all of our political situations. But I think, we have to try and act in what we believe is the best interests of the borough as a whole. And that's what we're here to do. And we're in a very different place today than we were than when we took the original decisions about this site. So we know that the planning committee turned the application down, but we also know that that was allowed on appeal, and we have to accept that. We can't change that. It was allowed on appeal subject to conditions, and those conditions will be worked through. If they're not, then it can't go ahead. But I think when I walk around the town at the moment, what really worries me is the amount of notices in shop windows that say we're closed for good. So Nourish Cafe in Crouch Street, I saw the two young women that operate there last week, and they said, this is our last day, we won't be, I said, well, you coming back? No, we're not coming back. Patisserie Valerie closed, Debenhams Suit closed, Laura Ashley closed, Argos closed, The Works closed. I could go on, Leader. So we can have debates about how much money students are going to spend. But we all know that in the past, Sainsbury's has been vulnerable. And we do need to make sure we keep food outlets like Sainsbury's going. We know that footfall in Curzon hasn't been what they would want, and certainly hasn't been in recent months, has it? And First Sight need visitors to be going in there, taking advantage of what's on offer in that setting. I think we're all minded and we're all going to be very careful about our language here. But I think that this has been debated many times before. And I have to say it's never been called in terms of the decisions that have been taken up to now. And I don't think we've got anything to hide, Leader, from any investigation or review that might come our way. As Andrew said, we need to be mindful of our duties under the Equality Act, and I'm particularly concerned that we are compliant with our duties, and the same goes for our biodiversity, as has been mentioned. But we need to make sure that as we go forward, and if we do end up getting to a position where this site is developed, that we do plant trees and address those biodiversity issues. We take very carefully the comments that are made by those residents that will be affected, undoubtedly, by this development. But I think we will do what we can to mitigate against the harm that they are going to experience. And of course, nobody wants anybody to be put in danger. And we need to work with those residents to get that as best as we can do. But I don't think we've got any other alternative on the table at this moment in time. If the County Council had wanted to do something different with the site, then they've had a very long time to come forward with those proposals. I know Basildon Council are very far ahead, further ahead than we are, with our plans for a youth zone. Guess how much money is coming from Essex County Council in revenue support for that? That will be £0. And we have to acknowledge the fact that we've already got 4 national portfolio organisations within the borough. And we all know going forward that there's going to be a tightening of expenditure and not more expenditure. So yes, we all want more cultural activities in Colchester, but we have to acknowledge the position we're in at the moment and what public resource there will be going forward to fund those cultural activities. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. I'll take Mike next, please. Mike Leedy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. You listened to all the arguments and we heard it, but as Julie said, as it's a lot of opinions have been expressed over this one application over the years. We live in a different world, in a different country, in a different situation now, where we were a couple of years ago when this application was first deemed 2 or 3 years ago. I wasn't for it, totally against it, but now where we are in this situation, a financial situation, a massive medical crisis in this country, it's a different story now. I've attended 2 pub watch meetings in the last few months, and they are the licensed premises of Colchester and the borough. And to hear the stories of how they are, all of them struggling to survive, really. And it's sad that they are getting the grants, which is great from the government and administered by ourselves. That's keeping them going. But they need something else. And the late night economy is a massive area for us. There's loads of jobs, lots of income, and it encourages people to come in. So we need to look after not just the daytime economy. Retail is, as we all know, is suffering really major, but the nighttime economy is thriving in Colchester and will be again. And at today's pub watch meeting in Colchester, the members of that committee, they all voted to support this planning application because they believe having 300 odd students and their friends, families would bring an awful lot to Colchester and give it a real major boost for them to help survive. And with people coming in, that would encourage retail to come back. We know that the government acknowledges the fact that town centres are dying all around the country. Colchester is a better place than most people because we have a fantastic historical interest in here. We have all the castles and museums. We have a lot more than what others have got, and we need to build on that. And to build on that, to have all those people in the town centre coming in, be great. Yeah, there's all loads of arguments about how much they'll spend, and yeah, will they or won't they? But I believe they will do. They're young, they're in the town centre, they will take advantage of it. As I said, the government has acknowledged the fact that town centres are dying. They're thinking about changing the planning laws to allow empty shops to be turned into residential homes, to encourage more people to live in the town centres. They probably won't be students, but there's not much difference here. It's people coming in. We know that Debenhams has gone. Will the owners turn that into massive flats to do that, to have more people coming in? This is the future from now on. We need something different and something to get a boost to our economy, to help the nighttime economy, to help the daytime economy. And I am now, someone asked earlier whether we support this. I believe that in the circumstances we find ourselves in, we should support it. I've heard all the arguments for and against. Yeah, 3 years ago, they were relevant more than now, but we need this development in the town centre. I will say about public safety, of course, we take great concerns on public safety, and where there's issues within there, whether it's more lighting, we put in CCTV cameras, all of that will be taken into consideration. And if people do have concerns, then get in touch and we'll try and address those issues there, because there's a big worry about walking backwards and forwards. But that's where I am, Chair. The nighttime economy need this. They all support it, and I'll support them in supporting this application for it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mike. I don't see any other hands up, but I will go back to David shortly if I don't. I'll just add to that contribution from Mike. I appreciate that. We aren't here to go over the planning application that has been before our committee. That has then been to a planning inspectorate, and we are now with the application going ahead. That is happening. And what I'm really keen on addressing, and I know that David has touched upon it, so has Julian, so has Andrew Weavers, the monitoring officer, making sure the planning conditions are absolutely stuck to and carried out. That's our job as a local authority, but also the particular focus on the accessibility issues, and that those are already planned in. We accept that and make sure they are absolutely applying to the rules. Appropriation is a process, and the comments made by Andrew Weavers were really helpful in understanding the supportive way in which we must do this going forward to tackle any inequalities, equalities issues that may arise. And Mike touched upon some of that with the safety issues as well. That has reassured me, but I still think we must be cautious about that and make sure we carry those out fully and hold the developer and the intermediary to account on that as well. I similarly to Mike have been neutral on the issue, and especially as it was going through the planning process, I made clear that I was neutral on the issue. I also made clear that somewhat been misrepresented tonight, but we would not look to seek court action. That is nothing that we would like to do. Instead, we want to work with the County Council in dialogue. That's exactly what I have said before. Appropriation is a process. It is not legal action. And if we come to that, if we come to the negotiations, then most development on this site would require appropriation of some kind. And of course, we want to negotiate with every individual in a way that, again, goes back to addressing those equalities issues. So for me, it's about continuing the dialogue with residents and parties with rights on the site. It's about continuing the dialogue with the County Council. And I would say that Councillor Young said there are a lack of alternatives that have been put forward. And this site is restricted in its size. It is a brownfield site. So we are looking to improve this site. In terms of public realm, there would be improvements to public realm and there would be an economic benefit. I won't go into any more detail than that, but I would say the dialogue remains open and we are working to our reasonable endeavours as we have contractual agreements to, but we also ensure our relationships are kept as best as possible. So I do say directly to the County Council that we remain open with the dialogue, but also to our MP, who unfortunately did not include us in the dialogue that he sent to the Secretary of State. At that point, I will leave it there, and I'm happy to go to any other Cabinet member, but if not, back to David to conclude. We've given this quite a bit of our time and attention on the meeting tonight, but also in the background, reading the documentation that's been given to us, reading the emails from residents, but also communication from other parties and organisations too. So thank you for the contributions to this debate. David, I'll come back to you. I see no other speakers. So if you want to pick up any of the other issues and conclude, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. As you say, we spent some time on this, so we should. We'd all agreed on that. And I'll probably take another 10 minutes just to make sure that we've got a further opportunity just to understand what we've got in front of us before we turn, excuse me, before we turn. Some will be smiling, thinking he deserves that. Before I choke, or return to the recommendations, whichever comes first. As you say, we've all been through this several times together, so we should. Tonight's our decision, but we've been forming a view, and some of us have been changing it. And to Councillor Lilly, you know, my thanks for testing opinion. I've been doing the same, and I think it is right and important to say that views have altered because, frankly, the circumstances have. That's helped me too, because I've always understood the passionate views about the cultural possibilities. There was never funding for it or real alternative, but it was very understandable as an instinct and a desire. But now, as a source of public funding, you know, I think we would just know that that would not be easy to justify, easy to support, easy to deliver, even if the site made it possible, which is challenging given the lack of, you know, the lack of alternatives. Independent viewers have suggested to us is, you know, is achievable. So if you colleagues are aware of the report, I'll just draw out a few things, you know, where it is worth saying, as the report reminds us, it's a process. You know, we followed on from our cabinet report in June, as well as informal discussions. So we're seeking authorisation to appropriate for planning purposes. Let's stress that again. This is not pressing a big red button. We're getting to the point where we could, if we can't, reach agreement to exercise an appropriation authority for a period. It's not to discount the consequences. We talked about those at length. We referred to, and the paper refers to, the relationship with Lumno. It's 2 years since we gave approval to long leasehold disposal, and that itself is not, I repeat, unusual. In practice, it secures rights. We turn it round. It secures the rights in a way that a freehold sale would not. That agreement was in February 19, planning consent December 19, all the things that we know. It was subject to conditions, and that's been mentioned by several speakers, one of which was disabled access arrangements, where our understanding is that the officers are getting close to a solution which will meet the planning committee's concerns. So let's hope that that is the case. The point here is that the conditions are for the developer to reach and satisfy. Our duty is to keep to the word that the agreement with reasonable endeavours, which in my view have to have some flexibility in them. If they're to stand any test, if we will be challenged by them, they certainly should allow for time to process. We want to have that so that the conversations needed with county and with those affected, even if it's for a period and subject to mitigation, to allow time for that process and to allow for the fact we are slow. From the developer's perspective, nobody wants to hear that. Their offer, which we find attractive in some respects, maybe more than before, for the reasons described. They've been waiting a long time. Nobody else will care about that, but we've got a duty to make sure we do. We have to give time to the process. That's my judgment about reasonable endeavours. And I suspect if tested, that will be something like that. Time to good process, time to conclude. I won't repeat what the paper says because I'm assuming that everybody has had the chance to read it one more time. It describes within it the space, it lists it, it draws it. I think it's ended up being as clear as a complex equation can be. One important thing to say to you all, it of course includes other correspondence, objections listed in the annexes, together with a covering commentary. Now, I know that you all have looked at that. I just want to say to you that I personally have gone through all of that again. And I know others listening may disagree. I thought that the summary assessment was a reasonable one. And I found the letters worthy, that's the least to be said, but I've given them personally more time. I know officers have. The assessment, I think, is a reasonable one, and I believe that we have touched on the points that matter already in the conversations that we've had and in the way in which issues, particularly about access, have been flagged, have been accepted and are being addressed. We have touched on biodiversity, which was one of the things I wanted to make sure we did. And equalities obligations, I don't think we need to revisit that. I will give an opportunity, I think we should at the close, for cabinet members, whether Julie, Teresa's got a hand, or officers want to add something else. And I think that we have done this justice tonight. I would have some closing remarks, if I may, Leader, when we've gone round one more time to see if colleagues have anything else they want to add or to turn our attention to.
Thank you, David. I think Councillor Higgins has one more question, and then I will do a final check. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm looking at this from a sort of planning point of view. As far as I know, anybody else could put another planning application on the site, and they haven't done so. But also with this particular planning application, we still have to go through the process of signing a Section 106 agreement with the LUMNO. So how far have we got on that? And if that fails, then does the application fail?
I'm not able to answer that.
I think that's for officers, for Andrew Weavers or Ian Vipon. So Andrew or Ian, would you be able to answer that question now? Or is that something I'm hoping you can? I feel that the conditions must be met. So Andrew or Ian, please. Thank you.
Chair, if I can come in on that, Ian Vipon, Strategic Director. You're absolutely right. Any conditions, gramping conditions, 106 agreements all have to be completed before the development could commence.
Ian, could I just say that just for clarity of those listening, so there's been something about process in sequence here, including why did we ever do this before we removed all the issues around access and third-party rights. And as I hope we've made plain in conversation, but it's worth repeating it, there is a natural sequence. Agree, find a developer, agree the key terms, which has long been done, require them to do what they must do, and see that whether or not they can satisfy the conditions, and we play our part. So could you just, in that context, that there is a natural sequence, say whether you think we're in the right place. This is not, I don't think, central, but it's a very good question from Councillor Higgins. Are we in the right sequence, and what's your expectation on timeline?
Yes, maybe if I could just broaden the context a bit, because I think there's a sort of sense on occasions that this is unusual. This is done up and down the country in complex urban areas, and in fact, if you look at Colchester itself, I mean, way before my time and many others, I suspect, but the council would have acted to take possession of what is now Culver Square, Lime Walk. Those were backland areas, not in their time, not unsimilar to the site that we are looking at here, where there were many third-party rights, many ownerships, complex situations, complex archaeology, conservation issues, all of the similar situations as we have now. And what happened there was essentially the council became the landowner of those sites and provided a long lease to those shopping centres. Importantly, I think, retaining freehold, and that freehold possession of those shopping centres has held the council in good stead, and the council as holder, if you like, of the community aspirations for those areas. We've been able to exercise some control when needed in terms of those developments. So I think in that context, it is just worth understanding that, as I say, this is not unusual in Colchester. It's not unusual up and down the country, that inevitably in historic, older, complex urban centres, there is a need to consider when it is appropriate to obtain control over sites, and for how long, and then to consider on what basis the council, on behalf of the community, retains an interest. And that's what we've been seeking to do here, as you say, Councillor King, for many years, in trying to find the development to make this this happen on this site. If that helps, Jan.
It does, thank you. And to the point, section 106 is a natural part of the concluding discussions that would be had with Alumno. I think that's how I would play that back to you. Is that correct?
Indeed, we have a situation where essentially the inspector has given full planning permission, but it's what we call full planning permission, as distinct from an outline planning permission. So the details are pretty much agreed, subject to certain conditions, and those conditions would have to be discharged as with any other development in due course. If they can't be secured, then obviously the permission in that context runs out of time. But at the moment, they have got a full planning permission for the site.
Thank you. For my part, that works well, if that does for Councillor Higgins.
Thank you. Right then, let's conclude the discussion. David, are you finished there?
I am indeed. I think we can go to the recommendations. I would just add only that we've noted some follow-up steps that don't stand between us and turning to the recommendations. for example, clarification of post-development positions with bollards and the like, looking in the short term, continuing to press for complete mitigation if we can, and looking for alternatives if that's not possible, alternative forms of car parking. So there are some points which I'm sure officers have taken away, but we can go to the recommendations in my view.
Thank you, David, and thank you, officers, for putting that up. If we can keep that there. There's one particular line that it acknowledges that discussions continue between the Council, Colchester Borough Council, and Essex County Council, which is hoped will obviate the necessity to use Section 203 in relation to their rights over the site. So that does absolutely establish and acknowledge the point that discussions and dialogues remain open, and this process is simply a process that we are agreeing could possibly happen after our decision tonight, if required, if needed, along with the discussion that we've had about the planning conditions that must be absolutely included on accessibility and on impact upon equality as well. So therefore, with that all noted, I see no further hands up. I thank you all for the contribution to the discussion, and I'll go to Andrew Weavers, please, to conduct the vote. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. Councillor Corey.
4.
4. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you all for that discussion. It's been very in-depth. It's probably one of the longest papers we've had for quite some time, and we will continue the dialogue with the County Council, with residents, as we go forward, and fellow councillors. Thank you. We move on then to item 9 on the agenda, which is to do with housing. And we have a number of items on housing coming forward, which show the great investment into our homes for our people in the borough. So I go to Councillor Fox, please, for the item on housing revenue account estimates 2021 to 22. Adam.
Thank you very much, Leader. I hope that these papers will not take the same amount of time as the previous items. They're perhaps not as contentious, but I do think they are really important to the work that we're doing across the borough. The housing revenue account estimates set out the financial basis of our plans for the year ahead, as well as demonstrating their affordability over the next 30 years. The paper shows our ability to meet the ambitious plans set out by Cabinet previously over recent years. This is a significant investment in our borough, and considering the current economic climate, could not be more timely. Under central government guidelines, this year's rents as set out in the paper will rise by 1.5%, which will enable us to fund our future investments. And last year we agreed the extension of the management agreement with Colchester Borough Homes, and the paper sets out the management fee for the year ahead as well. The papers also detail the medium-term financial forecast, and with interest rates at a record low level, it's prudent to borrow now and invest in the delivery of not just more homes, but better homes in our borough as well. So the recommendations are as laid out in the paper, and I recommend to Cabinet that we approve them.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you again for some of the transparency and involvement of members in the recent new contract renewal, which affects some of this year's revenue budget that you've just alluded to. So we all know a bit more about the forward plan for the next year. Thank you for that. Are there any questions from Cabinet members? No? Okay, I'll move straight to the vote then, please. Andrew Weavers.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
4. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. And moving on to the next item, item 9.2, which is the Housing Investment Programme, which Councillor Fox, you will guide us through, and this shows how we are investing in more homes for the people of Colchester.
Thank you very much, Leader. The Housing Investment Programme sets out £40 million investment plan for the year ahead, and this includes substantial investment in existing housing stock to ensure that we maintain good standards for those who live in council-owned homes. The programme also includes allocations for our acquisitions to bring former council houses back into council ownership. This is being delivered under the banner of our 100 Homes project. There are also allocations for our council house building projects, and you'll know that we are building 350 new affordable homes on council-owned land in the borough. We also have funds allocated to meet our commitments under the climate emergency that this council declared to bring houses up to a higher standard of energy efficiency. And these initiatives will also impact on reducing inequality by reducing people's heating costs, as well as the impact on the wider environment. And I think this demonstrates how we can link different elements of our strategic priorities as a council. There are some slides that I'd like to run through showing some of the progress that we're already making in our council building projects. And I hope that we can bring those up on the screen now. So these are some of the new build sites and some up-to-date photos. The next slide shows an example of what we've previously delivered. So these were the first phase 1 sites delivered a number of years ago in Beerchurch, and they demonstrate what we can deliver when we're able to, and the freedoms that councils now have to borrow more enable us to bring the new sites on board. If we could move to the next slide, please. And so this shows the houses planned at Hardings Close in Oldham, where construction began last year, and we're making good progress. If we could move to the next slide. We're delivering 2 2-bedroom houses and 2 3-bedroom houses on this site. And the next slide shows further progress that we're making. And I think what's really important is that we are delivering affordable homes across the borough, as much in rural areas as in Colchester town itself. If we could move to the next slide. And it's really great to see the progress that's being made on these sites, despite the current challenges, despite the challenges of being on site during the coronavirus pandemic, and also due to some of the inclement weather lately. But these houses will be finished over the coming months. If we could move to the next slide, please. We're also delivering on new sites in Greenstead at Buffett Way and Scarf Way, and these commenced this month as well. And it's great to see progress happening on the newer sites as well. If we can move to the next slide. And in just over a week, we'll be on site at Military Road, where we're delivering 8 new properties, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments and 2 bedroom houses. And these are being delivered to Future Homes principals as well. And if we could move to the next slide. And these are the plans for Elfreda House. And we've talked much about Elfreda House at previous cabinet meetings. It's a multi-million-pound scheme to deliver a brand new sheltered accommodation scheme in Shrub End. If we move to the final slide. So construction will begin this year, and we hope to be able to open the new site in 2023. Of course, these programmes are delivered by our housing company M4 Homes in partnership with Colchester Borough Homes too. And these investments are delivering contracts to local suppliers and contractors too. So we're not just delivering homes, but we're providing good quality jobs alongside them too. And in the current environment, we know just how important that is as we begin to build back fairer in Colchester. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you, Adam. That's really really powerful stuff. It's good to see us developing council housing, affordable homes for people that need them in our borough. It's good to see them literally being built by local contractors in as much as possible, as you say, stimulating our local economy as well. So it's great to see those plans. And for the accommodation at Alfreda House, I joined you probably about a year and a half ago at a residents meeting where we could reassure residents that absolutely we would support them at every step, whether they wanted to stay at Alfreda House with a new development when it comes, or to go to different accommodation and to be comfortable there. And I think that process with Colchester Borough Homes has been really sensitive to their needs. And I really look forward to the improved capacity at Alfreda House, the improved safety, the improved accessibility, and the improved environmental credentials of that particular building, as well as the other sites that you've talked about. So I'm really pleased to support this. It's one of our key parts of our strategic vision to provide homes for the people that need them in our borough. So I'm absolutely 100% behind this, and thank you, Adam, for presenting that this evening. Are there any other comments to be made by Cabinet members? Councillor Higgins, please.
Sorry, I've lost the raised hand on my computer at the moment. Yes, just to say that it's looking a very good project, and I'm looking forward to seeing the ones in the ward. But also just to give a plug to the commercial services, because they do a great job in looking after these properties for us, and they do justify the fact that we do have such commercial services. So that's it, Leader. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. On that basis, with no other comments, I commend this report to you as Adam does, and I'll ask Andrew Weavers to come in and administer the vote, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. And moving on to the last, the last run of papers to request delegation of authority for the contract for Alfreda House that we were just talking about. So back to you, Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. So hopefully this is quite a straightforward paper. In order to deliver that new scheme at Alfreda House, we intend to award a contract to a contractor in the coming months, and this provides delegated authority in order for that to complete the demolishment of the current building and the rebuild of Alfreda House as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We've all had time to read this paper and ask questions of officers in advance as well, and of Adam. And we are supportive of this. It has gone through planning, as mentioned. So, are there any questions or further comments? No, thank you. Again, very supportive of this. Want to look forward to visiting Adam with you, with residents when this reopens in 2023. Okay, let's go to the votes, please. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. To the next item, 9(4), the delegation of authority for the award of the Housing Revenue Accounts contracts. So, Adam, over to you again, please.
Thank you very much again, Leader. So this is to delegate the authority for the award of contracts for works within the housing investment programme that we were just running through. And these are really important. These are about some of the improvements that we make on a regular basis to homes across the borough. And they include, but they're not limited to, window and door replacements, heating system renewals, and some of those really important climate emergency response works that we talked about. And we know that these contracts are coming up over the coming year, and is to request authority to myself to award those contracts as and when we require them Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Adam. That is quite straightforward and to the benefit of our residents to delegate that authority to you and to officers. So thank you. Are there any questions? I can't see any hands up. Therefore, I will go straight to the vote, please, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss. Was that a 4?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Andrew. And the last item on housing, 9(5), the request for delegated authority for the new Utilities and Energy Bureau contracts. Adam, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I promise this is the last one. This is about ensuring that we are able to access the best advice and experts in reducing our energy costs. It actually operates across both general fund property and parts of the housing revenue account properties too, particularly in terms of the HRA around supplies to sheltered housing schemes, in particular, like Elfreda House, as we were talking about earlier. So I would request the delegated authority for myself and Councillor King in his role as the portfolio holder for resources as well, to award contracts for the provision of utilities and an energy bureau service. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And again, fairly straightforward, again, to enable residents to have the best opportunities within our council provided homes. I see no other hands up or waved, so I will go to the vote, please. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly. Councillor Lilly.
Oh, sorry. 4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
4. Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Cabinet. Thank you, Adam, for those housing opportunities. So moving forward to item 10, that is the half-year 2020-21 performance report, including progress on the 2020 to 23 strategic action plan. So can I ask Councillor Julie Young, with your portfolio responsibilities, to present this, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is our half-term report, and it's set in the context of being in the global pandemic. And of course, there are a lot of red and amber indicators as a result of the challenges we've faced over the course of the last 6 months. We will be looking again at this item with some refreshed KPIs at our March meeting, our March Cabinet meeting, and then that will be placed in front of scrutiny for them to look at our refreshed KPIs. However, I think it is important for us to note that we have made progress on our strategic plan over the course of the last 6 months. And I just wanted to mention a few of those items, if you'll bear with me. So we brought in our no idling policy in October, which is against the contents of our strategic plan to do things to help our climate change emergency. The weed control policy, the woodland project, the 25 e-cargo bikes, which we are going to see rolled out with supporting businesses, charities across the borough. We've talked a bit about the Amphora housing projects, which look absolutely fantastic. Great to see those pictures that we've just seen. We've got the town investment plan, the work we've done on Northern Gateway Sports Park, which is something we really need to be proud of. And also, even though we've had challenges, if I just wanted to mention something in my own portfolio area, which is the Heritage Open Days. So we delivered that for the first time ever in a digital context. And we got over 14,000 people that engaged with that online. So COVID has presented many challenges, but it has led to some innovation with how we deliver services. And we've picked up awards as well during the course of the last 6 months. So we became the most entrepreneurial council and the most commercial council, which I think, you know, is really testament to the hard work of our staff that have been still performing throughout this really, really difficult time. And I think Councillor Goss mentioned the performance of Waste Services, and we do pay a debt of gratitude to all of our frontline workers that are out there supporting our communities. It's been a long night. I'll leave it there, Leader, and we'll talk again about our KPIs in March.
Thank you, Julie. No matter what the headlines may be about the controversial issues that come before us, this is the bread and butter of us delivering for our residents, and the satisfaction rates of our customer services calls, the turnaround rates, the other factors you talk about with our frontline services are fantastic. And I was going to say, you could say that again when you said about the Entrepreneurial Award. It's hard to say, but it is absolutely true that we are aspiring for higher income that also benefits residents and gives entertainment in terms of the events and the other commercial establishments that we have. So that's absolutely right. The 2 awards that we have had add to the business as usual support that we give to our people, our residents, our customers, whatever word you want to use, that I thank our officers for delivering, and for you cabinet members and for our members who contribute to the good running of this council. So thank you, Julie, for that summary. And thank you again to the scrutiny panel who worked with you coming to conclusions on this particular mid-year plan, but also about the years going forward with the impact of COVID, understanding that and not trying to second guess. So thank you. Can I go to the vote? I don't see any other. So thanks for the recommendations there. I don't see any other hands up. So yes, to the vote, please, Andrew.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. The next item is the progress to members of the public, which we're always very efficient at getting back to members of the public. So I just want to check with our Democratic Services Officer, Richard Clifford. Have we ensured we've spoken to verbally or written a response to the Have Your Say speakers from last time?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that we have.
Okay, thank you. Then for Cabinet, it is for us to note the report, and we don't need to vote on that unless you have any questions or queries. And I'd say we agree that. Thank you. Noted. I move then to the final item, which is to the exclusion of the public, just to debate and finish the items that are confidential on the agenda, which we will do in a recorded sessions on Teams. So, Councillor Young, as Deputy Leader, can I ask you to move the motion for the exclusion of the public, please?
Yes, Leader. In accordance with Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that any items containing exempt information, for example, personal, financial or legal advice, in Part B of this agenda, printed on yellow paper, can be decided. Exempt information is defined in Section 1001 and Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you, Julie. Can we vote on that motion, please, and agree to that? Andrew, do we need a roll call or is this by consent?
Sorry, Chair, by consent.
Okay, are there any who do not consent? No, you all seem absolutely happy with that. So thank you. We agree that motion. Thank you for this meeting this evening. We will move now to the minutes and the agenda item that is confidential. So thank you all for this public meeting. It now ends and we'll move on. Thank you.